After a wild race at Laguna Seca, the best drivers in the Club Sport Series powered by DGFX Racing have jumped across the pond and have headed off to Silverstone to see who can conquer this 3.61 mile circuit. It's round number 3 of the season for the next 2.4-hour race here on RacespotTV, and what should be a thrilling one here on Silverstone's International Circuit. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from across the world. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Noah Rempel with Hugo Ruiz in the director's seat for the next 2 hours in 25 minutes total of action for the racing across this circuit. As mentioned, 3.6 miles is the circuit length on this circuit, the international track. 10 turns, and of course made its debut on the iRacing service in 2009, but a different landscape than what people may notice. Very foggy weather across the circuit as the top drivers try and conquer the circuit. Let's take a look at your prototype standings first off. Graphite Racing leads the standings over Sork Racing Orange and Apex Racing Group inside the top 3, with WB Racing B inside the 4th spot. Neville Racing rounds out the top 5 for the sports standings class. It's Snap Racing on top, leading by a decent amount over Slow Racing Team. They have not been slow much of the season so far, with Gold Racing Team White and Torque Freak Racing Avon Rise, along with Team Vikings Valhalla, the winners of the last round, rounding up the top 5 for the sports side. Club standings, World of Sim Racing Team leads with Bombshell Motorsports in the 2nd spot. World of Sim Racing Team's junior team starts in 3rd in the standings entering today, with Real Pixel Motorsport and Ava Pervatic rounding out the top 5. And it's been a wild start to the season. Of course, we've seen a wild second round of the season at WeatherTech Raceway, Laguna Seca. Nolan, of course, a different type of crazy today. Very foggy weather at the circuit, as seen in the briefing earlier on and as seen at the top of the broadcast, 65 degrees Fahrenheit, just under 18 degrees Celsius.
First off, I think to say that the race that we had at WeatherTech Raceway was wild, I think that's a little bit of an understatement there, Justin. That race was it was complete madness the entire way through when you think about it. We had drama, we had action, we had fights all over the field. We even had 3 wide in some places. I think we can expect some really, really good racing here as well. This series has proved to be an extremely exciting series. It never fails to disappoint with its action. We can expect really big things from all of these drivers here today.
Absolutely. Expected distance 2.4 hours. That's 2 hours 25 minutes as the drivers roll off the starting grid and make their way around the racetrack. Why don't we take a look at your starting lineup for today's action? Let's start off with your prototype class. It is SimRC.de Strawberry on the pole with Patrick Young behind the wheel, followed by SK Motorsports on the outside front row. WR Racing B starts off third with Fight Racing inside the top 4. Going to the 105 range is Sork Racing Orange with Apex Racing Group Blue and WR Racing. Rounding out the field is PCDC Motorsports Red. Then you have your next group of drivers. These are the drivers driving the Porsches today. On the pole for the class, Gold Racing Team White, along with NAB Racing, Porsche Basel by Sork Esports starts in 3rd. Bombshell Motorsports in 4th. Sim Sport News Racing starts off in the 5th spot with Team Vikings Valhalla in the 14th spot overall on the racetrack. Fisher Motorsports starts 7 overall in the class with Huge Jazz Gold, recording the 8th best qualifying time in the class, with PCDC Motorsports Blue and Racecraft Esports following them. Real Pixel Motorsports starts off 11, Torque Freak Racing Avon Rise in the 12th spot. And 4 more entries, German Sim Racing Friends DGFX Slow Racing Team, and 2 drivers not setting times due to penalties from the last round are Huge Jazz Blue and German Disaster Racing, both reached infraction point limits for the series. That brings us to the final class of the day. These are the drivers driving the MX-5s today. Ava Verbatic Gold Racing Team starts up front. The World Sim Racing Team, GT Temple Racing, Torque Freak Racing start off the top 5. And that, again, amongst the group, again, includes drivers such as the World of Sim Racing Team Junior, the Torque Freak Racing Team Megas along their group in the 5th spot. Team Vikings, Serp Neil, along with Bombshell Motorsports' 286 Sim Sports News Racing, and Real Pixel Motorsport rounding out the grid as you see on your screen. But again, very tiny racetrack. I mean bigger size racetrack, but very quick times, I should say. Meaning it makes it not feel as big. Lap times ranging from 1 minute 14 seconds to 1 minute and 34 seconds. As they work their way towards the final corners of the circuit, going through left field now as they head towards today's race start zone. It heads from the mid portion of the rumble strips you see for the pit entry chicane all the way to the end of Woodcote for today's action. Patrick Young is the control car for the start of the prototypes as the pace car heads off the racetrack. SK Motorsport starts on the outside. We're up and away. Green flags out. We're underway from Silverstone. Clean start for the class as why don't we go back to Nolan? Starting to look towards those Porsches as they head towards the starting zone.
Gold Racing Team White, he's holding the field. He's still waiting as they come to the restart zone. And Gold Racing White Team with John Phillip Gench behind the wheel. And he takes off, and he is off and away. Beautiful start for the Gold Racing Team Whitefield. They're already beginning to jostle for position behind them as Marco Derricks from Nabrace has to go on the defense coming into Copse. And he's going to have one car on his left side coming in through Copse now for the first time today. Oh, so close through turn number 1. Clean start for your Porsche field.
Clean start for the Porsche field. Now it's the time for the MX-5s to whirl their way towards the restart zone. The starting zone for today. They're off and away now, heading down the front stretch past the pit walls. And a very slow start, of course. Dirk Fetterman leads them off. Matthew Smith in second. David Del Rio, though unable to clear by Simon Etches for GT Tempo Racing. Able to finally do so in the Rebel Strip coming through Copse. Clean starts for the entire field today. Very contradictory to what we've seen last week, especially in the corkscrew, as everyone tries to go single file. Again, distance 2 hours, 25 minutes today. Of course, drivers supposed to have fair share times. Estimated pit window about 50 minutes to an hour for each of the classes today.
And it is true, we've got about an estimated 50 minutes to an hour fuel window for each one of these cars. Minimum 15 minutes required for all of these drivers to be in the car for, and of course, an even share overall throughout the course of this event. The Porsche were looking really close. We saw cars like that of Real Pixel Motorsport trying to dive it in underneath. Drivers like Thomas Ertzen for Slow Racing Team coming into Abbey, but they actually had to back out of it because they were just too far back. Dive bombs will not work here as well as they might at tracks like Laguna Seca because the corners are just so much faster. You have to pretty much be on their inside for the corner by the time you're already there, or you're not going to be able to get anything done.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on this one. Need to be able to get stuff done. Of course, right now, as you see, you're looking towards the back portion of the Porsches. Of course, the two drivers that had some rough times were Hugh Just Blue, we talked about, in German Disaster Racing. They're going towards the back, and they're going to have to drive by a car inside the gravel trap. That is German Sim Racing Friends that spun around with Florian Hohen behind the wheel. It appears that was a lockup, as you'll see on the race spot replay.
And looked like he might have also gotten unsettled by the curbs just past Maggots as well as he came on through. The car was really unsettled the entire way going through that second portion of the turn there, and it just sent that car right around. Very clean spin though, no other contact with the car. If he gets his pace back up, you'll be able to get right back into this fight.
He lost a few seconds, but not much trouble overall in that scenario. You look towards the MX-5s. Look what's at the back of some of this. We've already seen some of the prototypes. Already those radicals start to move on by. The battle for third about to get disrupted here by the cars you see in the backdrop. So this again shows the big time difference in speed. These are the lead drivers passing by the leaders of the MX-5s already. We're not even done the second lap as Kurt Gaynor gets contact. That is Carter Kurt Gaynor who made contact with Dirk Fetterman.
We also have more contact as well between Sasha Lamb for Torque Freak Racing Maggots, as well as that with Jared Bowell for Bombshell Motorsports as well. They have big contact, and that car number 2A1 driving a P30 overall, he's got big damage on the left front of that race car. So there was a lot of significant contact going through Maggots as well for a lot of these drivers. That could impact a lot of these cars heavily, especially when they're trying to fight for position.
And this was something we've seen a lot in the last round at Laguna Seca. And we were talking a bit how there's more stakes here this week. However, we're already seeing these drivers reach even quicker than we've seen at Laguna Seca at some of the worst spots. Let's take a look at the race spot replay with some of this as we go back to where Nav Racing was as they made contact and spun around.
Well, it was a clean start for now, and then, of course, after we say that it was just a clean start, everything begins to kick off all at once. These lead drivers really catching the lap traffic on an astronomical pace. We're not even 5 minutes, we just passed the 5-minute mark, and already the Mazdas are being lapped by the Radicals. I think the reason for that, though, is because they had to wait so long for that restart zone right at the start of the race that by the time the Mazdas actually started going, the Radicals were already halfway around the track.
Yeah, that is, again, a major difference, of course. Big differences in speeds that came into play in these first couple rounds. You're looking to battle for second, meanwhile. Make it now third, alongside with second for the MX-5s. That's a dive bomb from World of Sim Racing as they now try and deal with GT Tempo Racing. As they go near side by side. That was, again, GT Tempo Racing, making the pass. And now it looks like these might go back and forth. The more they go back and forth, the more they might lose this battle for the race lead just in front of them.
Now, that can all depend if that battle for the race lead up ahead heats up as well. Because if they slow each other down by fighting, and these guys here in third and fourth get to slow each other down as well through their fighting, that could actually allow World of Sim Racing and Junior, who is right behind the weight and in the wings, he could come up and make him a few spots here as well, especially if these guys get really aggressive early on in the race.
Indeed, right now, this is a 4-car battle, mind you, for the race lead. And one of the things with the MX-5s, the draft can be pretty helpful for these cars if they can stay aligned to stern. And towards the end of the straightaways, you see Gold Racing Team taking a bit of advantage. We have a spin, though, for the Radicals. It was PCDC Motorsports Red with Albin Nystrom, who is already off into the pits.
And he actually got that car way unsettled on the exit of Cops, coming through, got into the AstroTurf right on the exit of the corner, sent that car right around with a bit of a snap oversteer, and he backed it hard into the tire wall. Big air damage for that number 46 machine, and they're going to have a lot of work cut out for them. Looks like potential suspension damage as well. In fact, big suspension damage as well for that number 46 car. They're likely done for the day.
Yeah, that is going to be very bad for them. Very bad news, of course. No fast repairs in this series. Meanwhile, the battle for the race lead. Matthew Smith able to get the slingshot to get side by side with Dirk Fetterman. However, he's in the preferred racing line, though, as they battle side by side for the position and move their way once again towards the quick right-handers and move their way now towards Bridge.
See, the thing about these Miatas is that they can actually make these moves for the lead in corners like Bridge, because if you're in a Radical trying to make a move through Bridge, it would be almost suicide to try and go and do that. But if you're in the Miatas, you're going so much slower than the Radical, so you can afford to make these types of moves. And of course, Simon Esches for GT Tempo Racing, he picked up another spot as well. So Matthew Smith, racing for Gold Racing Team, he's dropped back to third place now from the lead, and he's going to have to try to use the slingshot here to make something coming into Cops.
Right now, the Porsches are on lap 5. And they are now starting to lap the MX-5s as you see the shuffling around Matthew Smith trying to get a slingshot again. However, the cars you see on your screen are the ones that they're going to have to deal with. Gold Racing Team White still in the class lead with Bombshell Motorsports is 186 in second. We talked a bit about this before, how, of course, there's the driver limits. Last week, we remember Bombshell Motorsports had some strong laps. Were potentially going to finish on one of the 3 drivers in the class on the lead lap. They failed to meet the requirement for driver time, meaning they did not earn really any points from that Laguna Seca round.
That is true, which is why strategizing for your driver shifts, they can play in so heavily to how a series like this can play out. Oh, there's actually contact between the race leaders, and that is Simon Edge just going right around. We got one car as well into the grass. That was Dirk Fetterman. So the battle for your Mazda lead just ended in absolute disaster for Simon Esches.
And it started off with, you see side by side, nearly 3 wide. In fact, GT Tempo Racing seen the opening and the hard braking zone into Abbey. And then just getting hooked, GT Tempo gets spun around. And Fetterman ends up having to go through the grass. He's now got a bit of damage, I believe, towards that whole entire front bumper. He shuffles back to third, World of Sim Racing to second, Gold Racing Team rather to the lead. As you look at some of the battling, that is 8th position getting wedged between the MX-5 leaders.
We've also got a little fight that could heat up a little bit for your overall race lead as well. In the Radicals, Carter Kundinger for SK Motorsports. He got oh so close to Patrick Young for CRC.DE Strawberry, who really seems to be struggling so much. Now, Patrick Young, we have seen him back at races like Daytona and at Laguna Seca. He put on an extraordinary amount of speed on all of these drivers. It's really the lap traffic that's holding him up so much, and the lap traffic is actually backing him off into SK Motorsports and Carter Kundinger. That's another thing we're going to have to keep an eye on, is because a lot of these battles, they're staying close to each other because all these lap cars that are trying to lap each other, they're backing all of these different drivers up into one another.
And now we're starting to see these guys lap the prototypes, lap the Porsches. three wide action in some of these cases where you have a prototype trying to lap a Porsche, trying to lap an MX-5 as they come out of the corner. Again, separation for Patrick Young for the time being. We are just about 10 minutes into the action here. The prototype's already 8 laps around as a major hold up for Young. Justin hauls off into the grass. He had to go for evasive action after the overall race leader came up right to the back bumper. That time heading into, I believe it was Priory.
Yeah, it looked like he almost just about ran wide, and then, of course, he actually drove it into the grass himself. It looked like trying to avoid being hit at Patrick Young. So already, the chaos is beginning to mount up, as we've been seeing it do so often when the lap traffic catches each other in this series. And we actually got another car off as well. Justin Hall just went off again at the exit of Woodco as well. Just a little bit of an off there. Didn't lose much speed, but still, every second you're in the grass, that's 1 second that you're losing time to the drivers in front of you.
And I don't think you want to be having that rough of a day that we've seen so far as you look at some of these drivers cycle their way and work their way now out from Maggots towards Ireland. The long straightaway here, a good passing area as well, where a lot of drivers can carry a very big amount of speed. However, this low braking zone in Abbey is where we were talking about potentially a lot of incidents happening today. We've already seen a couple of them build up, not even 11 minutes into the action as Patrick Young gets held up this time by Slow Racing Team.
This is going to be happening all throughout the race. We're going to see these drivers being held up. It's actually here because Carter Kundinger going for the lead on the inside of him going into Brooklands. He's going to get that move done. Can he seal the deal here in Luffield? The answer is yes. So Carter Kundinger to the lead overall for the Radical field for SK Motorsports. They've also been a very fast team, and we've been seeing them slowly working their way out through the grid from Daytona through Laguna Seca, and now they find themselves right up there in the lead, being held by another Porsche, though, coming in through Cops. And that's going to allow Patrick Young to close right on in immediately.
This is one of the craziest races, once again, I think I've seen for SK Motorsports. 37 points at Daytona, 59 at Laguna Seca scored, and taking advantage of some of the mistakes. If you're a driver like Patrick Young and seeing all of this where you're in the lead, you're looking very comfortable, set some of the faster lap times before then, what's going through your mind that once you reach, for 2 straight laps in a row, slower lap traffic at the worst possible place?
I'd say you really just got to keep your head down and work with it, honestly. It's just something that's going to happen at these smaller tracks where we've got 3 different classes that have such a dramatic speed difference from each other. He's got to be very, very patient here, and that's something we're going to be seeing. I think that's why we're seeing a lot of incidents early on. Drivers are trying to make up positions early while everybody's close together, but it is, in fact, the fact that these drivers are making these moves, that's why they're still so close together. As actually, I think Carter Kundinger just got really loose coming in through Brooklands. No, that was Brooklands that he was coming through, excuse me. So big moment for Carter Kundinger, but that will allow Patrick Young to actually be held up once more by Alex Crawford for huge ass gold. One team I do want to actually mention as well is those huge ass cars, because they have been having so much bad luck this season, especially in their Porsche class. They're still looking for some good luck, and now they've had one of their drivers starting at the back of the field for failing to meet those driver requirements as well from the last race we had at Laguna Seca.
Yeah, there is that in terms of infraction points, if you reach 13 on the season, it gets to the point where you get moved to the back of what is called the waiting list for an event. And for Hugh Justice's blue entry, that's been the case where they got 17 of them heading into today. German Disaster with 13, hence why they're shuffled to the back of their respective classes, his field grids for today. Hugh Justice Gold, meanwhile, who had not as much bad luck, is currently sitting in the 7th spot as they shuffle back up towards Team Vikings Valho, driving in the Porsche, of course to say, what am I trying to say here? Closing up slowly on Bombshell Motorsports with Kirk Crum behind the wheel for Bombshell. As you look at your top 3 on the side of your screen, closest battles going on between here, Alon with the Porsches after the contact with the MX-5s. They separated out to now 3 seconds from Gold Racing Team.
Yeah, when we had that car that went around the 217 machine, a lot of those Miatas had to take some really evasive action to try to both avoid that spinning car, as well as the lap traffic still coming through from behind as well. So that really separated out your Mazda field. We got a huge battle that's heating up, though, in your Porsche class for 3rd place, actually. A 4-car battle for for third place. Really, actually, it's short down to a 3-car battle now for third place. But of course, your race leader as well coming through here. That could also help tighten up this battle as well. Kirk Crum from Bombshell Motorsports trying to seek down Jean-Philippe Gendron for Gold Racing Team White, while trying to hold off Tor Andres Berven for Team Vikings Valhalla as well.
And also having to deal with Patrick Yun working his way through. Look out! They also got Luke Yun and a few RMX5s. Wolfgang Wildenhauer mixed into the battle as well, as that's going to actually help Berven, I think, a little bit. Gets the back end. Now has to deal with WR Racing B. That is Stefan Nobes running his way alongside the curves. Heading through left field they go. And not able to do anything quite yet. They have an RMX5 to use as a potential pick. Crum does, as they all work around as a prototype decides to make it 3 wide down the curves and works its way through Woodcote. Again, estimated distance to go 102 laps if you're right now in the prototype. Distance estimated is 96 laps for the Porsches. That's how big of a difference there is in speed. There's only been 2 teams essentially with trouble today. PCDC Motorsports Red, which had their incident before. We talked about the car you see inside the paddock, and WR Racing due to technical issues. Those are the only 2 drivers with issues so far early on in this one, other than the minor contacts here and there.
Now that number will start to slowly creep up though as the race goes on. I feel like these drivers, they're just going to have to be able to find something else to make them work, as there's a big knot of cars over there down at Abbey right now as they try to work their way through various different lap traffic as well. That's going to split up your Porsche battle as they come up on your Mazda fight, which is all going on for, I believe, that is going to be 4th place in class, and a little bit of contact, I think, between the 217 machine again and one of the Porsches as well.
Yeah, and I think there was some contact there from Bombshell Motorsports' 286 as well with the overall class leader, as they have to work their way to the outside line of Brooklands and head into left field. 3 wide contact trouble behind. It's Torque Freak Racing Mangus that spun around heading into left field. They lost control of the back tires and hit one of the Porsches. It was Sim Sport News Racing powered by Ice-Zone Green who got the worst of it.
Oh dear, it was only a matter of time before that was going to happen, with all those cars being in a big gaggle like they were. And it's such a shame for Sasha Lamp as well, because that car, it already had damage on it as well on the front end, and now that damage has been just exasperated because of all this. Now Sasha Lamp did not go to the pits, so they are still out on the track, so that'll prove to be quite interesting to see, as we got one car as well, I believe it was the 217, that actually made a move around the outside of Jared Duell for Bombshell Motorsports, coming in through Maggots as well. So that'll put that 217 machine up into 4th place in class.
And as you've seen on your screen too, a shuffle of positions after the contact has now Wax has moved up a spot. You're seeing that 286, 5th overall in their class right now. And it's shown a bit of speed here and there so far. Their fastest lap of 134.7 on the day. Fall off because of the traffic has already shuffled to as much as 2 seconds. Some drivers are already as much as 4 seconds off their fastest times, in part because of damage, such as this one you see on the left front of Sleipnir, Team Viking Sleipnir, and others because of how chaotic it's been, especially with all the traffic being reached essentially on some of the tightest portions of the racetrack, some of the hard braking zones today.
And we got a couple of hard braking zones as well. One of those is, of course, in the corner leading up to Abbey as well. Another hard braking zone, you could say, is coming up for Priory as well, though not as heavy. So there is quite a few different braking zones for this track with different varying degrees of, I guess you could say, difficulty to try to manage, which what makes this track so unique, I feel. And that's why I like coming to Silverstone so much for races like these. It's such a different feeling for so many of these drivers. One Porsche runs off wide. It's German Disaster Racing, Jans Lemon. He's going to run out wide. They're going to go 3 wide behind them as well.
And this is scary. That is Torque Freak Racing, Avon Rice trying to go for a late break. German Disaster Racing up ahead. That is for position for the class. WR Racing breaking up, making contact. That's a bit of a door bang. Some damage now to the left side of James Ewan's car, but looks fairly okay. That looked to be a bit hairy there.
And not to mention, there was also contact as well between Miata and Andy Banfield for VFX Racing Group Blue, who's trying to make a move now on Lee Ward for WR Racing. He's going to get that move done coming through the corner, and that actually was not for position. That was putting Lee Ward a lap down, so something happened to Lee Ward in that number 17 machine, because he's already a lap down, it would seem.
That was the car I mentioned that had the technical issues where he ended up falling off the racetrack, and you see part of the reason why. Came back on the racetrack, has fell to 7 of the class. Basically, of course, 8 drivers in the prototype class for today. Currently second to last in the class after the issues. Going to need to hope some luck. Trouble for Fetterman right in front of him, though. Fetterman went right off the racetrack, right in front of the car we were just watching, hitting the curbs on the exit.
I think this is one of those cases where it's kind of good that Fetterman managed to overcorrect that car and send it into the sand, because if that car kept turning around to the right like it was planning on doing, that would have been a huge incident involving at least 2 radicals and maybe even a Porsche as well. So good job of Fetterman. Actually, great save by Fetterman as well to keep that car under control as he kept that car sliding through the sand. Managed to keep it going relatively in the straight line. So few seconds lost for the number 225 machine, but apart from that, he's going to be just fine from here. No damage for him.
From that incident, at the very least, that's the positive for that. But at this point, things continue to shape themselves out with the amount of traffic. Just when you think things, usually I should rather say, on these kind of races on road courses, especially when you have to make pit stops, usually this is around the point when things seem to calm down on the circuit, where drivers don't attack as much, try and set up a consistent pace before the final 10 minutes before they have to come in. How do you see that playing out towards that direction once again, or do you see it going towards last round where it was full out every single lap, like we're seeing, for example, from Bombshell Motorsports closing in by 3/10 last lap?
I think, it kind of depends on what kind of a strategy your team wants to go for. If you want to go for positions early and then conserve late, that is of course, one option you could go for. Another option you could go for as well is to conserve early and go late when everybody's already got damage on their cars. They're already been kind of beaten up. They're just trying to limp it home to the end, and you got a completely clean race car, as you actually saw some teams doing as well at Laguna Seca last week, the differences in strategies as well. So that'll be something very interesting that we're going to have to take a look at. I would say, though, it'd probably be time for these drivers to start to back off just a little bit and wait just a little bit more to make those moves until further in the race, because there's no point in tearing your car up early if there's no need to.
I absolutely agree with you, and we've already seen drivers tear up their cars in a few different racing incidents with the chaos so far in terms of the traffic. They're still sticking along with this battle, of course, as they continue to get separated. Let's see the times this time. The distance from when we started was about 3/10 of a second. It's dropped to half a second on back, as now they've shuffled towards dead even this time by. Wow, dead even, apparently.
Now, that is something you do not see very often at all, and I'll actually give them props for that one, because you do not see that happen a whole lot at all. Warning for the 225 machine for avoidable contact some laps ago as well. But that is, of course, one of the cars in your Mazda field, so that is going to be one thing we're going to have to take a look at as well, is how will penalties be doled out? Will we see more post penalties this race, do you think?
We are not seeing that many so far. We've seen 3 of them for drivers qualifying during the drivers meeting earlier today. As well, already one warning to the 168 for the contact we see in lap 3. That contact that just got read off was the 225 of Dirk Fetterman's Aeroprobatic machine that we're talking about. But let's focus on this battle. Look at Valhall, Team Vikings. Valhall to the inside line, trying to get the move done. And moving on by, is Porsche Basil by Sork Esports. Able to make the job work is Alexander Wax. He's up into a podium spot for the time being.
And that's only for the time being. There are a couple areas you can draft on this track as well. One of those areas, you might not get a serious tug on the cars, one of those areas where you can get a good run with the draft is from the area leading out of the exit of Blufffield through to Cops, and the other areas, of course, down the Ireland Straight. So these are areas we're going to have to keep an eye out for as well, where that draft could play into effect. So the battle for third, though, it's cooling down for now, but that fight for your Porsche lead, they're still really tight and close together. I don't see that car of Kurt Crum going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to back off anytime soon, knowing there's a chance to try and win this round. One of the top teams so far in the early rounds of the season. Best lap was in the 120.4 range so far today. That is the fastest of the class so far. Pardon me, that is in the top 3 of the class. Porsche Basil has actually been faster at one point in the early portions of the race. Fall-off's gone by a full second as the tires have worn out as you still follow along with the class lead for the Porsches for the time being. Now it's the question, where do you try and again make the move? Still, of course, early, but we have seen Bombshell look really good in some of these tighter sections, but not be able to pick up as much on the corner exits all the way into the back part of the straightaways.
I would say it probably isn't the best idea to try to go for a move in Brooklands, because if you find yourself on the inside of Brooklands, you're going to be on the outside for Luffield and Woodcove, which is, of course, a much wider turn that you have to take. So that could be something that might not be the best idea to go for, but you could try to go for an over and under if the car ahead of you goes for an over-aggressive move on defense going into Luffield as well. So that is an option for Kurt Crum. Another option, of course, would be to dive bomb coming into that hairpin right before Abbey. That's, of course, probably the most ideal passing opportunity when you think about it.
Indeed, right now, and you see the time actually has lost that time in terms of the lap time. But you can also tell he's having a bit more wider corners at the moment. We are getting word, though, that we have a tech issue for Porsche Basel by Sorg Esports in the third spot. They are off the racetrack. Team Vikings Valhall cycles up to the third spot. That is disaster for a second straight round for Porsche Basel by Sorg Esports.
Oh dear, that's one thing that they were not intending on having happen at all, to say the very least. And of course, we still got fights up all over the place, but very unfortunate for Porsche Basel Racing, who were in a podium spot. They were beginning to pull away, and they're just gonna have their work cut out for them now. But I don't think they'll be able to get back in this one. So it looks like day over for Porsche Basel Racing, at least for a podium spot. Third placing in Mazda Field beginning to pick up as well, with Simon Esches and Dirk Fetterman.
Third place in the up and towards sixth spot in the class. Also just punted off an MX-5. Diego Velquez Dunez was just sent off into the sand trap heading to Priory just a moment ago. That was again a prototype running to the back end. So again, the traffic starting to play in. Still Dirk Fetterman in fourth spot. He did lose a spot to GT Temple Racing on the racetrack, as the overall lead has closed up. And guess why? Because of traffic, they worked through a whole gaggle of MX-5s and Porsches this time, as it looks like Jens Lillman nearly blocks Patrick Young as he goes full send, as they nearly head towards the back end of Sasha Lamp now as the next car in traffic.
And they're getting really, really tight together here. They're going to have to really keep an eye out on the distance between those two cars, because these are not like Miatas. You can just go for a bump around and have it all done and done with. Those two cars make contact. They're likely both going to be going around, so they're going to have to be really, really careful and really watch where they're putting their tires if they're going to make sure they can both escape this battle all safe and sound.
Warning given out for an incident on lap 9, turn 5. That is Bombshell's 286 for the contact we've seen a little bit before. But we still stick with this battle. Very tight between these drivers. Have inter-class traffic to work with too. The driver of Lee Ward, who has had technical issues, has talked about. This is going to make it even more difficult if they don't time it out the right spot. Lee Ward, this time, going to help it go to 3 wide as MX-5s go to the high side. Ward stays to the bottom. Young gets the run. He's got a chance to try and go for the pass and gets the job done heading into Cobbs.
That was beautifully done, but can Carter Condinger get the move back on the cutback for Cops? No, he cannot. Mike trying to make something here, coming into Maggots. He's going to have to be very careful though he's not so over-aggressive. Another big gaggle of cars making up for both Porsches and Miatas right ahead of them. And that is actually going to help Patrick Young use that as a pick, and he's going to put himself a big gap between himself and Carter Condinger now. So Patrick Young saw the gap that was there, and he took it, putting Patrick Young back up into the lead for your overall race.
And now here's the question. Can Young manage the traffic? No. He ends up locking up the tires, snapping loose, nearly lost the car. Just able to hold on to the lead, holding up Cardinal on the corner exit. But that was near disaster there. This has been the problem spot, though, for Young throughout the race today. Heading out of Bridge, heading into Priory. Each time he's reached traffic, he's lost at least a few tenths of a second. That's what lost him the lead that last time. He ended up falling to second. Look who's at the end of that train, though. That is WR Racing Stefan Nobes, who also has a shot to try and battle for this race lead. A 3-car battle for the prototype class lead.
That was big for Patrick Young. You saw how fast that car tugged around on him. That was almost cat-like reflexes there for you to be able to catch a car like that.
Indeed, right now, as that was going on, the 299 had crashed about 5-6 laps ago, backed into the garage doors while trying to get his repairs coming out of the stalls. He is not coming back on the racetrack for obvious reasons. These drivers try and come through the traffic at the moment as they work by Andy Banfield, and they have Nab Racing next to deal with. Huge hold up, though, that time, as Banfield held up Nobes along with Tomias Ertzen for Slow Racing Team 3Y in a 2-car hole.
Now that Porsche, though, that's right ahead of Patrick Young. Marco Derricks held up Patrick Young so much through Abbey, so that, again, will allow Carter continue to close right in. And that Porsche is going to move right aside to let second place overall through. Carter Continger's got a target on the back of that Radical, and he wants to close in on him so much here. He's trying to put every single scrap of power he can into that car. Clearly, none of these drivers taking a very conservative stance. They're pushing all out early on. Gets really close to him through Luffield as well. Sorry, through Brooklands as well. That was oh so close.
It's getting very tight. You can tell while it's still early on in the race, yes. While you can still save fuel, yes, by running in traffic. These drivers have not been doing so that much today from what we've seen in terms of some of the shuffling between these classes. Bob Show's been saving for the Porsches. Gold's been on their own for the most part for the MX-5s. But these two, every time they've seen a chance to switch positions or end up taking advantage of a mistake through traffic, they've jumped on it today. Reminder today, the fuel limits for today's race. Again, this series does have total fuel limits in the car. For the Radicals, 50%, 41.5 liters, 60% or 60 liters for the Porsches, 45% for the Global MX-5s as Kurt Dinger nearly loses the back end of the tire.
That is what Patrick Young wanted to see. Carter Condinger losing the back end as well. Again, Carter Condinger, beautiful save for that Radical, because I've driven these Radicals several times throughout the service, and let me tell you, when these cars start to get loose, it is next to impossible to be able to even predict on how to start to save it. So the fact that both these drivers have made such close calls so perfectly, it's really a testament to the skill that both of these drivers have. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe both of these drivers are actually the faster drivers on these teams as well. That could make it very as good as well. Penalty for the 168 machine, escalation due to preseason laps.
That I'm going to right now trying to double check this right now. That is again the 168 Porsche by Basel by Sorg Rennsport Esports. Stop and go penalty due to insufficient preseason laps. That is a new one.
It's not something that I expected to come up in race number 3, certainly, to say the least. So that's very interesting. That'll be interesting to see how Rian Kirchhoff for the 168 machine will be able to handle that penalty, how they'll be able to kind of deal with that throughout this race. That could really shake things up at where they're standing right now.
Absolutely going to shake up how this race goes for today. Again, that team has also had, if I'm thinking of the right one, yes, indeed, has had technical issues at times today after being in the top 3. They've already changed the correction now to a 286 car. That is Bombshell. That is Bombshell Motorsports' 286. That is, I believe, an MX-5 for the escalation due to preseason laps that they have just changed. They still are battling, though, for the top 2 in the class. As you see that again, Bombshell Motorsports' teammate in the 186 is still in second. The MX-5 entry is the one given the penalty. If I'm looking at this, I believe you're right. And a black flag for Andrew Mick.
Oh dear, that is very unfortunate for Andrew Mick as well. He's been one of those drivers that's been trying so hard to bring that car home. He's a good driver. He's been doing it as very hard as he can all season, and now he's being hit with the black flag as well. That is so unfortunate. The last thing that car would have wanted to see.
Yeah, apologies for the confusion for the folks at home again. And that is the clarification. Andrew Mick is scheduled to drive in the 286 today. And it looks like the team is also asking for clarification at the current moment. You still fall along, though, with the second place car in the Porsches, separated by 6.5, just under 0.6 of a second. Just over that, rather. German Disaster Racing, though, has just opened up the class pit window. They are into the pits from 21st overall. Dirk Fetterman also coming into the pits.
I got a couple of drivers coming into the pits, it would seem, as well. So this will shake things up big time as well. We got Jans Lendhimmel, you said, for German Disaster Racing. He's in the pits. Jans Lendhimmel for German Disaster Racing. Jans Lendhimmel as well for Real Pixel Motorsports. So that is a bit interesting to say the very least. I think that's a bit of a technical error on my part, so apologies for that confusion. We do have cars in the pits, though, ranging from Radicals all the way down to Miatas as well. So multiple cars coming to the pits. It almost seems like they're trying to work through damage more than a scheduled pit stop.
Indeed, right now they are telling the team stay out on the track for the 286. That is apparently what's being told right now as you see that fierce look of the driver of Jens Lehmann as he continues to get his service done. That's a very focused driver and very blue eyes.
That is very true indeed. Very high resolution mirror as well. I'll give them credit for that one. That's a mighty fine mirror that we're seeing there as well. But that's the focus that a lot of these drivers are going to be having throughout this series as well. As we take a look on the in-car for that green, red, and black helmet. So very fascinating design as we look around inside the car, it would seem, for this pit stop.
Yes, indeed. They continue to cycle through the pits. You may be wondering, what happened to that prototype battle we were seeing near bumper to bumper? Well, because of the traffic we're talking about, Patrick Young is now up by over 2 seconds as this all cycles out. Carter Kirkdiner was held up multiple times in some 3-wide traffic and near sandwiches this lap alone. And now he's way off from him by at least 30, 40 car lengths into the distance, in part because the gaggle of cars right behind him.
That is true, and Patrick Young doing everything he needs to put himself further and further ahead. He's now over 4 seconds ahead of Carter Kirkdiner as well, so that gap continuing to grow more and more with each lap. It's beginning to look like if Patrick Young can keep it out of the bigger packs of lap traffic, he's going to be able to just run away with it, just like we saw him do at Daytona.
And you may be wondering, and it looks like some trouble.
No, we almost had trouble. Patrick Young, just as I was saying, he might be able to run away with it. Big loose moment coming through. Abby nearly got the car spun around. He corrected himself on the exit of Abby, so nearly had trouble with Patrick Young.
And don't want to see that happen to him. Remember, they were very strong at Laguna Seca before, incidents ended up building up in terms of how that race went. PCDC Motorsports is in the pits as this is all going on. But look how tight this battle has gotten once again for the Porsches. It's now a 3-car battle because Team Viking's Valhall is starting to catch up into the back end of the toe of the car you're following on board with. Again, top 3 in the Class Gold Racing Team, Bombshell, Team Viking's Valhall as they work their way down the front stretch.
This Porsche battle is it hasn't really split up at all since the start of this race, and I feel like it's going to be a little while yet before we see this fight start to break up. We might have to wait until we hit the pit window before we'll be seeing this fight really start to break up, if it breaks up at all. They might follow each other right down into the pits as well, we got to keep in mind as well. Kurt Crum still trying to use the slipstream to get around Jean-Philippe Gendron right ahead of him. That battle's been staying really, really close, and you can see right there in the background, Tor Anders Berven, he's looking to make something work as well here if these two end up taking each other out.
And you don't want to see drivers take each other out for obvious reasons as they work their way through Abbey, but again, I think you hit upon it a little bit. When do you pit if you're saying this battle? Some of the drivers in the mid-pack are slowly starting to cycle their way into their stalls. What do you do as a team at this point?
I'd almost say kind of take a look at what everybody else around you is doing, because drivers might be going for an undercut. Some might even go for an overcut. We've saw that work a couple times for the overcut. We've also seen it work for the undercut as well. So it really kind of depends as to how you want to play your strategy and how conservative you want to be. But I'd say one of the first things you want to start with, if you want to maybe adjust your strategy, look around at what everybody else is doing and maybe even follow suit, because it could put you right where you need to be in order to really fight with the drivers you want to be fighting with.
German Disaster Racing, I think we know why they went for a different strategy. Apparently, they had to pit for 4 minutes of damage, and that was in part because they ended up making contact just a couple laps ago with Torque Freak Racing Avon Rise in a battle for what would have been 18th overall. That would have been, again, coming through Ireland, I believe it was, coming out of Abbey, in fact, through Cops, that ended up causing contact. That is on lap 24 for German Disaster Racing's day, and why they were in the pits for 4 minutes on their window.
I was beginning to wonder why they were staying in the pits for so long, because the pit stops, I know they can take a little bit longer in the road course series than we see them over on the oval side of the series, but on the sport, but usually pit stops don't take 4 minutes. The 286 machine coming down to the pit road.
And they were the team that has been having the possible penalties. Already a black flag issued to Mick. He was going through the official overall channel. Of course, you cannot do that, so he's going to see Jewel come out of the pits quickly. So the 286 off and away out of the pits after a very quick pit stop, it appears here. Again, they had a stop and go penalty given to the team.
So stop and go penalty for that 286 machine as the fights begin to heat up again. Now remember how we saw Patrick Young, who had managed to pull that 4-second lead. That lead is closed down now. It is now within a second, and Patrick Young ran really wide through Magus. That will allow Carter Dinger to close in even more. So this fight looks like it might be able to pick up here in a little bit as well, but I think Kandinga's going to have to wait here. He runs really wide through Abby, trying to go for maybe a late apex. You might have to wait here for Patrick Young to catch more lap traffic, which it looks like there's a good slew of cars that's not far off.
Yes, the first car they have to deal with is Team Viking Slepner of O. Christian Owenberg. Has taken a higher art apex and looks closer to the curb exit as Young that time. A warning just given out to the number 32 machine on the racetrack just now. That is the V Apex Racing Group blue car. Remember that contact where they made contact with one of the MX-5s? That is the warning for avoidable contact for them just given out. So that is an infraction point for them on the day. But let's go back to that battle real quick, because SK Motorsport, since they've gotten towards clean air, have been at some points a full second a lap faster. They were a full second a lap just a lap ago, lap and a half ago rather.
That is true. They are beginning to really close the gap. They were within 0.6 of each other at the line. You see down there on the delta there, they were a second and a half, 3 laps ago, 1.3 seconds, 2 laps ago, another 0.3 the last lap as well. They're slowly beginning to reel in Patrick Young. Can they make a move though before the pit window? That's again going to be key. Do you think they might even try to go for an undercut here?
Again, that is the possibility. This is a racetrack that's a very quick racetrack, and as we have seen today here, Nolan, traffic and where you come out from the pits with it could play a major factor, losing as much as 2 seconds on some of these laps. You still see the 2. Again, an MX-5 holds up the corner exit of SK Motorsports that time. That might lose them at least half a tenth. Have to see the difference in times. Yes, indeed, they did lose, in fact, half a tenth in part because of the traffic on that final corner. And now they're going to have much more. Look at this.
Including another radical they have to work through as well, with Shazan de Banfield 6th place overall as well. So Patrick Young is going to have his work cut out for him. We have a Porsche that went off ahead of them. Manuel Meyer for Fisher Motorsport. He went into the grass, all of his own doing. He's going to get himself all gathered up, all nice and good. Patrick Young still trying to work his way through, though. And Carter Dinger hot on his heels.
Still trying to provide the pressure again. He's been able to manage the traffic better. Had to lock up the brakes that time. Hello, James Ewens. How are you today? As Ewens moves his way to the left side. And this is, again, right at the worst possible spot for Young. Every time he's reached traffic today, I'm going to ask you this. He's ended up having to hold up himself through bridge, refusing to take the outer line. Is that, again, because of preferred line, of course, through bridge, or is that just not wanting to take too many risks heading from bridge into a hard left-hander into Priory when you're reaching slower traffic with differences in speeds as much as 5 seconds a lap?
I would say it's trying to avoid the risk, honestly, because bridge is such a difficult corner. Gabbleton 3/10 now at the line, so they lost 4/10 that past lap. But going back to what you were saying, yeah, I feel like it was more of a just trying not to take the risk, because I personally would rather hold myself up a couple extra tenths behind a Porsche that I could easily make my way through in the next corner than have to risk going off and spinning into another hard left-hander where I could get clobbered by oncoming traffic.
Indeed, you see them still close up. Some are prototypes, I should say, and they're coming in for those radicals. Part of that group was indeed WR Racing off-cycle. Racecraft Esports also in for the Porsches, as you see the huge Porsche move its way out of the way. For Patrick Young, his team today also involves Lucas Dolzer. He's not scheduled to be in the car when they stop in at the current moment, but that could be pending to change at any kind of moment. Carter Kurdiner, his second driver today, is Kyle Sturchards today. So the Midwest regional driver, prepare to hand it off if need be to the New York driver today to give them the fair share for the drive. Of course, you must make a driver change in this series. Some teams have 3 drivers available. Some of them have 2 for today's event. As you still follow along with Kurdiner down the front stretch and pass by a whole heck of a lot of drivers pitting, including, it looks like a second stop for V Apex Racing Blue, and it looks like they've destroyed their car.
Now, V Apex Blue does look like something really bad happened to Andy Banfield.
Very bad. This was on lap 33. Look at this replay. They were flipped upside down. That's how bad it was. How did this happen? Let's take a look at the replay. There's a good reason.
Oh, contact between a Porsche and Banfield just caught him right in the middle of that. Nothing he could have done. That was completely wrong place, wrong time. Nothing you can do in that scenario. He was already right up against the right side of the track. Goes for a big tumble in Abbey. That's probably one of the places where I would have expected a driver to flip over the least, honestly, throughout the course of this race.
But you got to remember, all it takes as well to flip is you hit at the right angle enough to lift the tires off the ground. That's what could happen on the racetrack, and that's why they're into the pits. Also in the pits, a lot of MX-5s along with Hugh Jazz Gould. So it looks like the pit window is wide open for a lot of these drivers. Alex Coffard still behind the wheel for the time being for Hugh Jazz Gould, with Andrew Fursett also coming in. Also coming in is the prototype now of Kurdiner, along with a bunch more Porsches with them in the pit lane.
And Carter Kundinger actually got held up going into the pits as well by that Porsche directly ahead of him of Marcel Mersa, because he had to lock up the brakes and nearly drove right through the back end of that Porsche as well. So Kundinger, a very close call for him coming into the pits. He no doubt lost a couple of tenths on entry alone. Alex Koffer comes out now for Hugh Jazz Gould. He's going to come out about right behind Manuel Meyer for Fisher Motorsport, and James Ewan, Torque Free Racing, Avon Rise right behind them. Now the question is, when will Patrick Young come down into the lane?
We're going to have to see in just a few moments, because some of the other class members now for the Porsches are coming in. Gurdon, Crum, Bervin, all coming in a row. Now Racing also trying to cut them off. They were 9th overall on the racetrack in 4th, having a quiet day and trying to match up to catch back up on strategy. Well, Patrick Young works his way through Luffield, and we're about to see if he's about to come in as the rest of the drivers tuck in. Patrick Young's about to join those said drivers. Looks like the pit window wide open as everyone's reached their fuel marker, as estimated about 50 plus minutes, give or take, for all the classes surprisingly today.
Now, Kundinger did not make a driver change, so SK Motorsports still has Carter Kundinger in that car. Will Patrick Young go for the driver change? Remember, Kundinger lost a couple of tenths on entry because he got held up by that Porsche, so could that impact the outcome of this little battle off pit road? This could very well determine whether we have a change for the lead here the next lap, as Kundinger already on his way through bridge as Patrick Young brings himself down onto the lane, getting a 4-tire change in fuel, it would seem.
And don't forget, it does take extra time to switch the driver. As you now see Kundinger, this is for the overall race lead. He's now coming his way out of Luffield towards Woodcote, coming towards the front stretch. Patrick Young has still not left his stall. This is going to be interesting to see if he can get the jump. He's trying to floor it. He is flooring it. But you see Kundinger is still coming down the straight. They're going to be near side by side. In fact, will be side by side heading out of Cops. As taking the race lead is Kundinger, even with the hold up for now. But Young is still within range by within 3/10.
Just barely manages to get the lead coming out of the pit lane, but that undercut really worked for Kundinger. That will put him up into the race lead. So I feel like that was perfectly called by SK Motorsports to bring him down when they did. That puts Young, though, right behind them. Remember, Patrick Young is on cold tires, so he's going to be a little bit slower on his out lap, trying to get those tires up to temp before he'll be able to really push for that position. He does have tires that are freshened by 1 lap. Is that 1 lap of freshened tires enough, though, to go for Carter Kundinger, who's being held up by a couple of miles right ahead of him?
That's going to be a major question. Again, it's been a very cold racetrack, still 66 degrees Fahrenheit. The track temp, air temp has stayed at 65 since it's constant weather for today's event. But now it's a matter, can he manage the traffic? Who's going to manage the traffic the best again? Most of the field has now cycled their way through their pit cycles, as they now work around the racetrack for the time being and work their way now through even more traffic. Bombshell Motorsports is 186. They're coming back down the lane. I think that's a second time. Correct me if I'm wrong, that might be a second time if I'm looking at this right for Kirk Rum. Yes, he's come down a second time. He might have got a speeding penalty.
Either a speeding penalty or they made a mistake with the fuel adjustments, but that's more unlikely.
Yeah, stop and go.
Anything.
Stop and go. So that is speeding. They might have sped right at the green cone on the pit entry. So that could be a major mistake. They go from top 3 back to 9th in the class, make it 10th.
That will definitely impact them heavily throughout the course of this race. They're going to have a lot of work to do to make up for lost time, because you spend so much time on the pit lane. It is, of course, a very long pit lane for Silverstone here, and you can't even floor the second you get out of the pit lane anyway, because you got that concrete wall the arm kill barrier that's right on the left side of you as you exit the pits. So you've also got to make sure that you don't hit that coming out of the pits, so kind of feather the throttle as you go through cops. So it is very, very costly when you have to make an unnecessary stop like they just did. That's all. That's what a speeding penalty can do, though, to you. It can take your day apart just like that. As actually, old Christian Underberg goes for a move around George Wasmus that didn't get turned in for Bridge. That was 4th place in your Mazda class. That was very interesting and overtake, to say the least.
There's been some interesting overtakes in that class, I have to say, today, especially we've seen with guys like GT Tempo Racing. Why don't we take a look at that said pass? Around that move, you see the Team Vikings car in the background first. And then you have the traffic working its way through. Hello! Just absolutely floored it on by, while Team GT Tempo slowed it on down.
I think GT Temple was trying to slow it down to let the Porsches through. And Team Vikings, they knew there was one more Porsche to come through, but that Porsche wasn't there yet. So they figured, you know what, I'm going to take that opening while it's there. So, like somebody trying to get in the fast lane on the freeway, he took that lane change and went for it immediately, and that really worked out for him. Really showing how decisive you have to be to make a pass, especially at such a technical track like Silverstone.
And you're now looking at what is a fairly technical battle for Fisher Motorsport and Hujas Gold. They're now battling for the 3rd spot. They're currently trading lap times as traffic breaks up the said battle. That is, again, Torque Freak Racing Megas, who did make the driver swap of Phil Roberts, losing a couple tenths for Crawford. But while we have seen the struggles for Blue today, of course, because in part penalties, because in part incidents so far this season, Hujas Gold has not been in quite the same boat. They've still shown speed towards the top half of the field so far in the opening rounds.
That is true. They did show a lot of speed. It just seems like it's been all the traffic that's been holding them up. It's been really kind of hindering their abilities to really go for positions. They've clearly got fast drivers because of how far up they're fighting for these spots. Like, they're fighting for a podium position right now for 3rd place in your Porsche class. Excuse me. But Alex Crawford, he's a very fast driver. A lot of these drivers are, in fact, incredibly quick. It's the traffic that just hinders a lot of these drivers and their abilities so much. But if they could get some clean air with them, Crawford, I feel, could close right on into Manuel Meyer and go for a pass.
And that's the big question. Can they find the clean air? Right now, in terms of where they're out on the racetrack, they got inter-class traffic as the next 2 cars up in front, and then basically the rest is all for positions at this point in terms of the drivers they have to do ahead. This time by, they actually lose 4 tenths. Remember, they reached a inter-class a lap car rather, right at the corner entry into Cobbs, which they ended up having to go into the brakes and lost them some time on the exit in the 1st sector. This time they try and gain it back by late braking and flooring it. This time through Megas and into Ireland. And that ends up actually hurting them, having to try and avoid getting in the grass there.
But not only that, but they unsettled the car severely and got actually really loose. So they were counter-steering there, trying to keep that car steady as they power slid through the corner. That's what really hindered the speed and no doubt hurt the tire life as well.
Yeah, and you don't want to hurt the tires on this because as right now there are some different drivers on strategies where some of them took tires. Some of them might be double stinting, as we see a lot on the road courses. There is that potential right now. So right now, Hujas Gold, One of those teams had a 23-second stop and are a part of a double stint group for the race.
This could be interesting here, seeing how these double stints could work out. We are, of course, seeing Carter Kundinger and Patrick Young. They've both been taking double stints. Both those drivers have been working their way through double stints as well. Speaking of the devil, here comes Patrick Young right up on the back of this fight as well, it would seem. Excuse me, we actually changed, it would seem we changed positions while we were looking around this, so I apologize for that one.
Yeah, we're looking at Hujas Blue part in there. And that's Hujas Blue working his way to the inside line along with Rene Kirchhoff. That is the battle for 9th and 10th overall. And you see, it's been a rough day for this machine for Racesport Esports today. For Racesport Esports, I should say. They had a very rough last round, of course. Did not make the minimum laps, essentially, after the incidents for them. Especially after the craziness coming to the final corner at Laguna Seca. This round, they showed speed again, being the top 3. Technical issues put them towards the back. And now it's basically the struggle just to try and get towards a potential top 5 because they are currently 3 laps down compared to the prototype race lead.
That is true, but you know what? These guys, I feel like they could definitely still make for a good fight amongst themselves. The Radicals might have something to say about how their fights could play out. Indeed, that could be the case, but I feel like these drivers will be able to work their way through. They'll be able to pick through these troubles that they've been having throughout the season, especially for the huge-ass blue cars. If they can really find some luck, they could be able to have something going for them. What did you see?
If you see Patrick Young taking the class lead away, as you've seen, he has swapped spots. You mentioned they were starting to catch up, and you've seen Patrick Young in the backdrop. Well, it looks like they have swapped spots finally. That was just in the past lap or so, because if we can go back to lap 42 for these two drivers out of Meggetts, you mentioned drivers overworking the corners this time and ended up sliding their way off the track. Kurt Dinger did that where he went straight into the sand to lose the lead.
Oh dear, that will definitely explain how he lost the lead. We got more trouble actually. Glenn Reed with WRC B just collided with the Miata going through Meggetts as well. So they both spun around in Meggetts, and that'll put damage on both their cars, slow them both down heavily. And actually that was old Christian Underberg that just turned right into the Radicals trying to go through him on the inside.
That was in just live action. We'll just show you what just happened. That Glenn Reed jumped in the car now for the B entry after the technical issues we've seen for Ward. And just dives it in. MX-5, not expecting the dive bomb, ends up having the collision. Both of them still keep going. However, going to be damage at least on both of these cars from that massive dive bomb into Meggetts.
That's again one of those things that those Miatas really have to watch out for, because it might look like they're a really long way behind, but those cars, they can catch up to you in such a hurry. So even if they look like they're really far back, if you think there's even a possibility that they're going to be there, don't take the risk and dive on in, because you'll end up hurting yourself just like we just saw. Because you saw WRC B in that replay. He was so far back on the straight before they hit the corner, and then he dove on in. He was right there and cleared the Miata, not expecting him to be there at all.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And some drivers might be thinking that way. Why put in the risk? At this point, though, that again was the prototype third in the class at the moment. That puts him out of the race lead for the time being, a battle, I should say, as Patrick Young gets held up for their said battle with Kurt Dinger. How to work around Burvin this time as it's down again to 1 car length once again. The struggles of maintaining or managing traffic rather through bridge and into a factor as they head back towards the front stretch. These drivers have an estimated 69 laps to go as they head towards the stripe once more.
And Patrick Young, despite all of the complications with the lap traffic, he's been doing an astronomical job of playing defense in this little fight that we've been seeing going on here as well, to be able to keep holding on to the lead as much as he could despite Carter Kundinger's undercut working. Now, this is actually one question. It might be a little premature to kind of think about this now, but when that second pit window comes around, will Kundinger go for the same undercut that we saw him use in the first pit stop? Because clearly it can work, because he made it work, just barely, but he did indeed make it work. As there looks to go 3 wide. Big hold of Patrick Young. Kundinger's going to try to go on the outside through Abbey. 3 wide now with the Miata stuck right in the middle. A Miata sandwich, it would seem, as the Radicals try to work their way through. Kundinger tried to make something work around the outside. Nothing doing, though.
And that had to be scary that time for Roberts. He was nearly sandwiched between two radicals and turned into lunchmeat, as Jan still keeps the class lead for the time being, an overall race lead, and working again through the traffic once more. This has all gone around. The new class leader for the Porsches at this moment is Team Vikings Valhall. They have taken the lead since the pit cycle now, and they are currently up in front by a decent point over SimSport News, powered by iZone Green, who's on a different cycle, and Fisher Motorsport as your top three in the class.
Indeed, so Team Vikings Valhall, they've managed to make a good race for themselves as well, working their way up to first place in their own class as well. Worked their way actually up. It looks like they worked their way up good 8 spots at the start of this race.
And there was some near chaos, meanwhile, for the one-time class-leading Gold Racing Team White. They turned around Andrew Mick, who we talked about in the 286 machine, heading through Brooklands, yes indeed, and ended up preventing maximum amount of damage. However, it's been a rough one for that 286 now that's been bounced around. Just look at the battle with Slow Racing Team for 9th in the class right now. They've been shuffling along for the time being. They were battling with Huge Ass Blue just a few moments ago. Now they have fallen off a little. They were battling, or coming up rather, with Blue Racing, with Huge Ass Blue, I should say.
That is true. They've had quite a few struggles themselves as well. A lot of drivers have. They're side by side on the exit of Cops, nearly door banging each other in the door.
Yeah.
As Porsche Basil tries to dive it up on the outside here, coming in through Cops. Contact, and he's off.
And Rene Kirchhoff has contact on the tight corner exit. Ends up having to snap the wheel to the left, and he's back and going, but has lost at least 2 spots on the racetrack. Again, contact in that first part of Maggots ends up being trouble for him. He still keeps on going. However, the whole right side, front rather, is crumpled in.
That was probably one of the things that it's again one of those things where it's kind of thinking in the back of your mind, don't try to go too wide through Maggots. It just doesn't work. And he tried to make it work around the outside going through Maggots. Honestly, I almost feel like he probably should have backed out of it, because clearly Sven Demille for Huge Ass Blue had the line coming in to Maggots. There was just no way that was going to work. It's just too tight. The braking zone is too heavy, because we don't go through Beckett's like we would do if this was the Grand Prix layout. If it was like that, maybe it could have worked, but I still feel like it would have resulted in something similar to that nonetheless.
Back to the overall class lead, overall race lead rather. Kurt Daner nearly had an opportunity on the corner exit of Luffield to try and make the pass. Instead, he reached the lap traffic of Florian Hohen at the wrong spot that time. He'll lose some time. Has the better exit though coming out of the Cops, and will try and get the run heading towards Maggots. They'll go their way over the green rumble strips. You can run towards that little tiny part of the green you might see them run across. There are some gray square rumble strips, as they continue now to have a couple more cars to reach. This might play in the hands for Kardiner, because every time Jan's reached a Porsche, he's ended up losing the lead. Kardiner nearly takes advantage. Can't dive in quite yet through Abbey.
He made an attempt, but didn't quite manage to make it work, as Kundinger still trying to find a way through. Now he's going to be held up as they go through a bridge. That will allow Patrick Young to go right on through, but he's got both a Miata and a Porsche still in his way, and what we've talked about frequently being the worst place on the track to possibly catch lap traffic, and he has just found that same spot once again. More difficulties for both these drivers as they're trying to work their way through lap traffic.
It's a crazy traffic we continue to see. Not as crazy as last round, thankfully, as 3 wide going on for Kurt Daner meanwhile. But overall, it's been a fairly calm race overall. We're just about just past an hour and 20 minutes to go on the clock. And I was expecting a slightly bit more crazy round. How do you feel about how this race has played out so far? Fairly clean for the most part, other than a couple contacts here and there.
I feel like it's had its fair share of action nonetheless. You know, we need to have these little moments where we have those little, I guess you could say, the calm before the storm, because when the action does come along, it helps it to be that much more exciting to the race. So these little moments where everything just kind of settles down, people start to find their rhythm, it's good for both the drivers, it's good for race control, because they don't have to worry about handing out warnings or penalties or anything like that. It's good to just kind of allow things to just settle down, everything gets its rhythm, and then, you know, then somebody will find somewhere to pounce, will be thrown right back into the turmoil.
Indeed, right now there is a warning that's been given out to the 184, it appears, for Fisher Motorsport. That was contact on lap 33, lap 5. They're also giving contact warning for the lap prior, it appears. Aggressive urgency driving, rather a part of that. The team under investigation, that was with VFX Racing Group and PCDC Motorsports Group that are making the claims on that. There is also a review now for the 201 of Team Vikings Footner for aggressive or unsafe driving. Team that has just reported something just now on the racetrack, so that is all going on. Look back to the two, once again, Torque Freak Racing make it 7 in the class. They've been bounced around like a pinball, but they're still with a good chance to finish with some decent points as they currently get shuffled around through the traffic.
That is true. That 268 machine really has been struggling so much throughout this race. They've been involved in at least 2 different incidents today, but they're still out there. They're still putting in a really good showing for us here, having all the damage on their car. They're really throwing in all they can do, and that's one of the key things here. Even if your car does look like it's been through a blender sometimes, you just got to really just try to push forward, and you never know, people might really mess up further up into the field, which will allow you to make up that many more positions than if you had just backed out right away.
We go back to where Fisher Motorsport is. They're in 3rd overall in their class right now, with Coffer from Hugh Jazz Gold providing the pressure. They've closed the gap by 2.3 seconds in the past 2 laps, in part because of some of those prototypes, in part because, again, Coffer's been able to put the pedal back down, put the focus back in, and now tries to dive in a little bit later in a bit of a higher arc for Mayer as he gets held up now by Dirk Fetterman, the 2nd place driver in the MX-5.
And Mayer really having to make a decision there at the last second to either go for it or back out. He decided to back out and going for the pass on the Miata, figuring it might be a good idea to just wait until a little bit later and not risk tearing the car up. And that decision probably allowed him to stay in 3rd place because he held his line, shutting out Alex Koff from Hugh Jazz Gold, who's taking a bit of a wider line for a tighter apex. Really trying to make something work here on Fisher Motorsport here. And this is one of those corners, left field, that could kind of go either way when you think about it, because it is, of course, a tightening radius corner. It does kind of get a little bit tighter as it goes in. So you almost need to get a late apex in order to really be able to get the proper line you want to get through there. A lot of these drivers, though, they've been really hugging the apex the entire way around the corner, which I find to be a little bit interesting, honestly.
Why do you find it so interesting?
I have no idea. I feel like, for me at least, I would just like to take a bit more of a wider arc in and then clip the apex right at the end, get the good drive off to go for Woodcote.
It definitely makes sense. Cones are now flying, coming this time out through Ireland. I don't think that is the type of wood cones. I don't even know where I'm going with that. You want to see flying. No pun intended, as the drivers still line up by 0.2 of a second. There was a loss of 0.2 on the last lap as they get near bumper to bumper once more, but it looks like they're getting towards close. A penalty just has been handed out now to WR Racing's B entry, a 30-second stop and hold for a dive bomb on lap 44, turn number 4. That is again for the incident involving Glenn Reed we've seen before with one of the MX-5s.
I am a bit, that's an interesting penalty to say the least as well, because again, that car, that Radical, it is, I can see where they're coming from on the penalty, no doubt. I can definitely see where they're coming from because he did dive in from so far back. On the other hand, though, you got to remember, that is a Radical going up against the Miata there, so it's not like these were 2 Radicals necessarily fighting for position either.
And they've also given Nobes a 30-second black flag to also enforce that set penalty on the racetrack now. We stick with the battle for 3rd, but to counter that point, you also don't expect a driver, even if it's a faster class, to come away 5 car lengths back and be right underneath you right at the corner entry when you're just trying to come down for the tight apex.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, I think that race control, it is in the end their decision. So they see it as being justified, so that means it must be justified. So race control does, of course, have the final decision in these matters. So it looks like it will be a 30-second stop and hold for Stefan Nobes for a dive bomb on lap 44.
And when you got to think about this too, we mentioned incident points during a race. If you have 9 or more in one event, you get an automatic disqualification for the race. That is 6 points alone if you get an aggressive or unsafe driving penalty. That's going to be the case for the 18 machine. We still stick, of course, with the battle as this has all been discussed, where Huge-Ass Gold has just not been able to really find a way to get on by quite yet again. This might be the case of saving fuel because we store in the late game of this race, so to speak, with about hour and 15 minutes. Why do I keep saying 15 seconds? And to go in this race here to go. So at this point, I wonder if Crawford's just saying, you know what, let's just be patient, save fuel. It's still ways away for the next 2 cars in the class. May as well see what can happen after the pit strategy and go from there.
That definitely seems to be what Crawford is going for at this point, because I have seen several opportunities where he could have kind of maybe nudged Manuel Meyer out of the way, but he definitely does seem to be playing the long game here. He might even try to go for another undercut like what we've seen as well to try to get around it that way, because as well, the lap traffic, of course, as we've discussed, doesn't help as well. Actually, a lockup, Manuel Meyer will send him wide. That'll allow Alex Crawford right up on his inside, so they're going to be side by side. Crawford has the optimal line though for bridge, so what will happen here? Meyer's going to back out of it, and that will allow Alex Crawford for Huge-Ass Gold up into that podium position.
And another case where a mistake happens, another pass happens on the racetrack. In that case, as you said, locking up the brakes that time. Of course, we mentioned, well, saving fuel. Some drivers might also, while of course being able to run, say, 3/4, 8% throttle behind the back bumper of somebody, be able to provide pressure. Do you think that was pressure from feeling the pressure from behind for so long? As throw that point out the window for a second because Mayer wants the spot back through Kops and backs out?
Hey, he definitely took a look at it. He took a little peek, but he decided to not go for it. He might try to make some here going into Magus. Having another look. He's going to back out of it, though. Do you feel it was a little bit from, of course, Alex Crawford putting on pressure, really harassing the mirrors of that 184 machine, who's now, of course, trying to do the exact same thing right back to Alex Crawford? Now, this is one of those interesting little things here where we might see, was Alex Crawford just being held up by Manuel Meyer? That was one thing I was beginning to think. Was he just being held up, and was he actually faster? Doesn't seem to be that way because Manuel Meyer is staying right on the back of him. Made another look going through Abbey, not managing to make it work.
And as this is all going on, they are slowly but surely catching up. In fact, the Sim Sport News Racing powered by Zone Green, while the times might not show it, this past lap, it seems Eric Barones is just way falling off. Remember, they had some major contact. Their front bumper right now is in fact completely destroyed in the 116. The next car for position, this would be second for the class with that 116 on a different strategy because they came in about 5 laps earlier in the pit window.
That is true, and I am a little bit concerned about Eric Bourdais for that number 116 machine for the Porsche running 7th overall, because that is a lot of damage on the front. I wonder if his car is maybe down on power, which would explain why he's lost out so much time, despite Alex Crawford and Manuel Meyer fighting so hard at each other over the past couple of laps.
See one car in the pits again. That is the machine serving the penalty of WR Racing B for what their infraction was, but surprisingly the times are about even for the cars catching up. It's just for whatever reason it seems, especially down the straights, they have to slow down. Hold on a second. Bombshell Motorsports forcing everyone to slow down because they locked up the tires heading into Abbey and checked up a whole gaggle of MX-5s and a couple Porsches. That was the 186, not the 286 that locked themselves up. However, their teammate did have to lock up that time too.
And Richard Bell for Graphite Racing in the Radical, he's trying to thread his way through all of this mess as well. He actually had to jump on the binders as well to try to avoid running into, I believe, it was Manuel Meyer as well. So that is, of course, 3rd place overall that was trying to work his way through all this traffic. And look at the back, here comes Patrick Young. He's also trying to make a move as well, as old Christian Uneberg for Team Viking Sleipner, he's going to come down onto the lane.
They've had a rough race themselves, that team today, as we've seen. But you see Patrick Young diamond his way through the traffic. Has to work his way to the outside of Andrew Mick and scares him for the slight touch of a second. But everyone's starting to again bunch up again. We are still about halfway through the window as a car's off in the grass. That is the 186 once again that's off in the grass.
Darwin Mines just going for a little bit of a slide going into the Magus. Definitely not the first time we've seen this. He unsettles the car. He unsettled the car going through the rubble strips, as you'll see right here. Wiggle, 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 overcorrects, just sends it right around and into the grass. We've already seen it a couple times today. That is just an unfortunate incident.
Whoa,
another
trouble.
Mistake for yet another driver. More trouble.
Yes, a couple of MX-5s just got punted around. The Sim Sport News Racing, powered by iZone 216, has just been punted towards the pit entry. That is in part because Roberts, who's been dealing with damage, was all around the field of left field, causing chaos with some Porsches too.
Oh my goodness, so a lot of chaos just suddenly coming up all at once. So Philip Roberts, it all started with him. He went off in as well. He caused those Porsches to really check up, and that, of course, in turn caused the Porsches to seem to drive right in to Jacob Tops. In fact, it is, of course, what happened. That sent him into the grass near the pit entry lane. Oh my goodness, a lot of chaos just stacking up all at once here.
A bit of a scare for some drivers. That is Florian Hoven, who got the damage on the left front because of all of that happening. And as that soul cycled out again, huge outscore. It's now pulled away to 1.2 seconds in part because of, everything seeming to happen as Porsche Basil by Sorg, Rensport Esports is coming in the 168 machine as this is all cycled around. But still an hour and 10 minutes on the clock. Still lots of pressure, still lots of time. Still chances for mistakes on the racetrack as we continue to see today. What do you think is going through the mind of a lot of these teams now with some of the mistakes and some of the attrition starting to build up on the circuit today?
At this point in the race, I don't feel like drivers are thinking more position-wise because a lot of the fights have been able to spread themselves out over the course of the event. I think they're more concerned about just making sure that their cars get as little damage as possible, especially with the lap traffic as well. One fight that we were paying attention to quite a while ago was, of course, that fight for the overall race lead. I think something may have possibly happened to Carter Kundinger because he is now over 5 seconds behind Patrick Young, who has just run away with that leader as well. And now Graphite Racing as well. He's about to be lapped by Patrick Young as well. In fact, he was just lapped coming through Cops.
Graphite Racing has been way behind for much of the race. Going to have to double check this. They've been running towards third or fourth much of the day. They did do a driver change already to put Richard Bell into the car. However, one of the top teams in the class so far this season, they've just been off the mark. When they have Osterhaus in the car, it went from 115s down to as low as 123s in traffic. Bell's about in the 117 range. That is around the same pace as the leaders. However, they are still holding on to third in the class. Sork Racing Orange is also battling with them for fourth. They have not pit in a long while, should note. They pit on lap 37, the both of them. They were, however, the teams that already took their driver changes for the race.
That is true. So they've already done their driver changes. You have to remember that as well. Patrick Young and Carter Kundinger, they have not made their driver changes yet. So they still have to do that. They might have to make those changes at the next pit stop. So was it those few tenths that have caused Kevin Enderman for S-Rog Racing Orange and Richard Bell to go a lap down as well? They might even be able to get that lap back as those other two radicals fighting for first and second. Now, they're not really fighting anymore, but those radicals running in first and second, mind you, they might be able to actually get that lap back and maybe even go for possible positions late in the race if they can put the pace down.
And for those wondering what happened to Kundinger, it was basically traffic. Again, basically reached a full line of traffic about a couple laps ago to cause the last amount of time. It was about 10 different MX-5s and Porsches he had to pass in Sector 2 of the racetrack alone, from Maggots all the way down towards Abbey. Which again, absolute chaos to have to think about in this one.
Yeah, it's again one of those things we're going to keep coming back to over and over throughout this series, all the way through, probably even into the penultimate and final rounds of the series. The traffic can play in so heavily to how battles for position can play out. Silverstone being, of course, a huge factor as what we've seen. We've seen Kundinger and Patrick Young grow so far apart and so close together so quickly just because of the traffic, the way it can really play into the hands of these different drivers. This fight for third here could begin to heat up here in a little bit. They are within 0.3 of a second now with each other, and Kevin Enderman doing a little bit of weaving down the front straightaway.
Only 2 cars on the lead lap. Again, SimRC, DE, Strawberry, and SK Motorsports today. Huge run for Enderman, meanwhile. Again, decides not to take it anywhere. Had the faster speed that time out of Cops. Again, might be the case of patience game coming up. A bad exit for Enderman that time. Looks like he actually lost the car a little bit on the corner exit.
The car just snaps around at you so quickly, and that seems to be exactly what happened, because that was such a sudden snap. It almost startled me because of how sudden that was. So Kevin Enderman still having to struggle with the oversteer that you could get with these cars on the exit, which just proves how difficult they can be to drive, as I've mentioned before, at tracks like Daytona. So both of these drivers, they are going to have to really work out, but all that time up, he's gained it all right back here through Brooklands, as of course Richard Bell catching more and more lap traffic through Brooklands and Luffield.
Indeed, lots of traffic to deal with right now. Graphite Racing, the mix of it in the number 92, as they continue to cycle a through set situation. More traffic. Bombshell holds a massive checkup. That's going to switch the positions as Sork Racing Orange dives it in. Huge checkup that time caused by Mick. My goodness.
Well, again, as a driver for the Miatas, what can you do about that? Cardi Cadena for SK Motorsport making a bit of a pass in the grass to get around Andrew Mick as well. Gets past him. He's going to get that car back onto the track. Half off, and Richard Bell's spun around as well for third place through through Megan's.
And that is in the live action. While you see the fog, he did go sideways. He was able to save it, though, and only lost about a second. That did cause another car to lock up, and another one is spun. It's SK Motorsports in trouble. That is Kurt Danner, who has spun off the racetrack and hit the Armco barrier trying to pass traffic.
He was being so aggressive trying to get on traffic as well. We literally just saw, not 15 seconds ago, him go half into the grass trying to get around Andrew Mick. He almost got nailed by Andrew Mick, trying to come back up onto the track as well. So he might be hit with a bit of a warning for an unsafe track entry as well. Looks like there is potential suspension damage on that car, and that
wing
will
damage.
effectively put the Dinger out of the race.
Massive wing damage there too, pardon me for cutting you off. Second look at this one. He just came across the rumble strips trying to get around the traffic, and bam! You see, that's where the worst of it came, on that flip up a bit in the air. That caused that flip for suspension damage. And yeah, I think I just seen that there too, the contact. He actually scraped somebody's door pane off on one car.
That was Andrew Mick, the same driver he just passed via the grass on the exit of Cops as well. So he's had a couple of incidents now where he's tangled with Andrew Mick in a span of only a few seconds. So that will definitely split all of the fight that's been going on in your radical field as well. Now the closest gap was 25 seconds at the line, and that is only going to grow. It looks like Patrick Young will once more be lapping every single car in the field.
And again, shows the talent of a driver like Patrick Young that we see in many of these different series. We continue to now look back towards the 5th and 6th place cars in the Porsches for these machines. 0.7 of a second difference. Huge Ass Blue, they're currently in the 6th spot right now. Of course, Sven Demol is now behind the wheel since lap 34. They were a part of the Undercut Club for the race today. As you see this gap continue to cycle around. With 1 minute and 2 seconds to go and 43 seconds on the clock. Now we're 2 seconds and 40 seconds on the clock, I should say. Why don't we take a look at your top 8 very quickly before we go toward the rest of the action. Sim RCDE Strawberry, Sork Racing Orange in front for their class, along with Graphite Racing. SK Motorsports in the pits after their incident. They are once the cars one lap down. WR Racing B also a lap down. The rest of the drivers in the class have had a nightmare of a day. WR Racing has had technical issues today, as well as penalties to serve. The Apex Racing Group Blue is flipped over. DC Motorsports Red had major issues in the opening stages of the race today. Then over to the next group of class drivers. Again, this is amongst the sport class for today's event. Team Vikings Valhall's in the lead after some struggles for the team battles they were having. But Nab Racing and Huge Ass Gold now rounding out the top 3. Of Gold Racing Team White is in 4th. Racing Esports in 5th with Hugh Just Blue making their way to 6th after having to start from the back of the field and nearly getting spun around a couple times. Slow Racing Team is a minute behind the overall race lead for the class. 1 lap down in 8th spot is German Sim Racing Friends, who have had a rough one. As cars continue to pit in, we'll shuffle things around a bit with Patrick Jan in, but the MX-5s, they're on a different window a little bit. They're still running with World of Sim Racing teams cycling to the front for the time being. They right now have GT Temple Racing in 2nd towards their back bumper, with Gold Racing Team already taking a pit stop and making a driver swap. They were in the lead before. They have the potential to cycle back in front once again. Ava Verbatic have already made their pit stop with Bastian Selman. They are in 2nd. They were 2nd before the pit window. Will the Sim Racing Team Junior rounds out the top 5 for the time being, with Team Vikings Slepner along with the Sim Sport News powered by iZone Machine, and Bombshell Motorsports is 286, rounding out the top 8. Why don't we go towards the Race Spot fan immersion? Why don't we? Catch up with some of the action. Why don't we follow along with Hugh Just Blue's Sven Dahl as he works his way towards the pit window. Let's find another driver, pardon me. Why don't we go with Racecraft Esports with Tobias Hockery as the pit window opens up. You're watching RacespotTV for the ClubSport series, powered by DGFX Racing on RacespotTV from Silverstone. That was your RaceBot fan immersion for the ClubSport series, powered by DGFX Racing. Coming into the pit window now is the 5th overall driver in the Porsches today, as a lot of drivers are still cycling in and out. That is Racecraft Esports you've been following along with. Patrick Young just a few moments ago nearly spun his car out as the only car left on the lead lap in the class for the time being. He still has to come in and do his driver swap for SimRC DE Strawberry. The only our 2 team drivers on the lead lap for the time being are Sorg Racing Orange and Graphite Racing. There have been a couple penalties though, in a couple situations since we have left. There has been a stop and go just given to the number 17, another one for WR Racing. This is for an unsafe driving penalty on lap number 46 of the race. That was in the situation where they went underneath Torque Freak Racing Megas. There's also been a couple of different reviews that have been cleared away, including the contact with the 216 and 188, along with the 138, along with Porsche Basel that we've seen before. We still look now at the battle for ninth now in the sport class at the moment. This involves SimSport News Racing powered by iZone's green car. The Torque Freak Racing Avon Rise slowly closing in. They've been gaining actually fairly quickly. As you follow along in the backdrop right now, Avon Rise has taken some hits throughout the race today, but they're trying to gain some time back. Louise Emerton's up in front, who is currently driving on 3 wheels for a majority of the race, for those wondering. Of course, with that damage lifting the left front suspension off the ground, of course, affects speed. They've fallen now a second off compared to the driver coming up behind. As that's going on, it looks like Steen Renee Christensen adds on to the issues with WR Racing, because they went off the racetrack just to the side picture through Brooklands, catching up towards one of their teammates. They have still stayed in 6th. They still have to come in for the stop and hold, I believe. But again, that team has had a rough one. Technical issues, multiple penalties today. It's not been the best of days for WR Racing's main entry on the night so far. It's been a heck of a race overall, though, as we still stay with the position battle for the 9th spot. Again, Louise Emerton behind the wheel for SimSport News Racing. And Torque Freak Racing has George Gruber working its way now by 2 MX-5s. That is a position battle they're passing by. Salmon and York Wasmith now between those 2 drivers. And watching as the differences in terms of the handling means a difference in being able to attack. Gruber dives his way in. Can't get the exit, though, out of Abbey. Not on the preferred line as they catch up to the back of Matthias Goldgeiner, as he's now still cycled to 2nd for the time being as the traffic goes on by. Again, Justin Prince with Hero Weeze in the director's seat. Nolan Repo is just with us for the first hour of our coverage. Thank you very much for joining us, Nolan, if you're listening along, as you continue to follow along with 54 minutes to go on the clock in terms of the action. There's the chance to gain some spots. A slow racing team has hit at the same time, and another penalty's just been given. This is towards that chaotic moment we've seen down the front stretch. Remember that 286? They've been just given a 3-second stop and hold for ignoring blue flags now. It shows the reason. You have to listen to said blue flags on the racetrack. A black flag now given to now Fabian Duska behind the wheel after switching out Andrew Mick, who's had a rough one, to say the least, again today. Currently in the 8th spot in for the 5s today, as he'll lose some spots on the racetrack with that. So far, the only drivers that are towards the DNF category: Real Pixel Motorsport, PCDC Motorsports Red, V Apex Racing Group Blue, along with SK Motorsports today as your only potential DNFs, as the battle still shapes up for P9 on the circuit for the Porsches. Last time by, Gruber lost about a 10th of a second in part 2 to traffic once again, as he tries to continue to close up the gap as this all continues to break down. Majority of the class leaders have separated since then on the racetrack. Right now, that is the traffic of WR Racing B. Pardon me, WR Racing's main car coming up to try and break this up a little bit to get on by. They go off to the outside, going to the right side of the racetrack this time. Emerton going to try and use him as a pick potentially. Christensen stays on the inside, nearly making contact this time to the first part of Megas, as Gruber's able to, in fact, having to lock up the brakes to avoid making significant contact. That's going to be potentially even more lost time in terms of that battle, as it's gone up to 1.1 seconds. Again, because of traffic, again, that's played a crucial part for today's race. Meanwhile, the World of Sim Racing Team Junior car has just tucked into the pits. Gold Racing Team has cycled back into the lead for the MX-5s as a quick update as the traffic cycles in front once more. Dive bomb this time for the Avon Rice machine for Torque Freak Racing to get by the traffic. Separate now by one car rather on the circuit. The overall class leader now has also come in as Team Vikings Valhall. They have not taken their driver swap yet. Tor Anders Bervin is about to duck into the car. Stuck out of the car, I should rather say. Yes, indeed, in the 111, they have the option and are putting in said option of Erling Volmer behind the wheel. Again, drivers must take a driver swap in this series. They take theirs now. A lot of others are also coming in. Torque Freak Racing also brings in George Gruber into the pits. He's been in the car since lap 35. As the team started with James Ewings, that's potentially able to save some time. Sork Racing Orange is also in, as they have brought in Kevin Enderman for what could be one of their final pit stops, if not the final pit stop, a third day today. Also coming in amongst the pit window, Bombshell Motorsports is 186. They've had a rough stint, as Darren Mintz has nearly lost control multiple times in the past stint. Kirk Crum jumps back behind the wheel of that machine. Also tucking in as well will be the Real Pixel machines. And that rounds out the drivers that are currently entered the pit lane, as you see from atop the railing at the end of the pit lane. And Sork Racing Orange pitting from the top three in the class for the time being. And cycle back out into P number 4 as they have thrown away from said trouble. Trouble though, and the pit entry. Slow Racing Team has been turned around right at the entry after they lost control in the corner entry and had to do a 360 and knocked over some cone. A good save that time to prevent damage hitting the concrete barriers as he ends up getting going with just burning up some tires. He did come into pit. However, that does hurt the feelings of a couple different cones on the racetrack with 49 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock. That's all gone in as well. PCDC has brought in their blue entry along with the pit lane of Golden Racing Team White now for Edwards. Also an update for Kyle Sherwood's now behind the wheel for SK Motorsports. They have come out and they have finished up the repairs. However, they're 20th overall, 7 laps down. That is still 4th in the class, by the way, because there has only been 8 entries today. And they have seen a lot of attrition early on. Graphite Racing has also just bobbled the way into the cones, and Abbey, as they nearly snapped in front of Racecraft Esports as well as GT Temple Racing, as you'll see in the race spot replay. This is another entry situation where Locked It Up had to do a double lock to save the car, and he's able to keep on going and just has to get by the traffic once again. That's a loss of about half a second maybe on the circuit for the team that's now second on the track. They have spun out again though. Richard Bell, just when you think he's been okay, it looks like something snapped. He had to lock up the brakes this time to avoid running over Steve Clary's in terms of the traffic and nearly rear-ended him. He's now in the pit lane. So Richard Bell, having a rough one, has already started looking towards the tax, as you'll see in the race spot replay. You see, had to lock it up, twirled to the left, stuck in the middle of the racing line. It ends up avoiding damage, however, has to go to the pit lane. Already lost one spot because of that. So trouble for Graphite Racing. Their counterparts are also competing in the Neural Endurance Championship, the season finale at the moment as well. At the quiet moment as you fall now back to 15th, where we see PCDC Motorsports Blue. They're trying to shuffle for positions to try and move up to 14th. Kirk Crum has fallen all the way back to the 14th spot after the team was up as high as 2nd today. They also have Slow Racing Team that is a lap ahead to deal with as well. That has been up and down in terms of their pace today as you follow on board still. That is Sodero Vanderhout behind the wheel now for PCDC Motorsports. Vanderheide now trying to close in, losing some time as they'll now deal with the MX-5 to the left side of the racetrack. approaching 45 minutes on the clock, and about 35 laps to go for the Porsches today. The MX-5s, their estimated time to go, about 31 laps to deal with this track. As for the prototypes on the circuit today, it's an estimated distance of 35 laps as well for some of the cars on the racetrack at the moment. It could be even less so at this quite moment. Looking at one of the MX-5's most dominant drivers today, leading by over Ava Verbatic by at least a couple seconds, is Gold Racing Team. Ava Verbatic's been bounced around a few times. They're trying to close back in towards the ball game. Salmon nearly leaves said ball game towards the rumble strips, able to save it from going in the grass. But either way, Dirk Fetterman started things off, was in the hunt for a 3-car battle for the race lead in the opening stages of the race, and then ended up losing control on the rumble strips, causing contact, losing as much as 10-20 seconds at some points, it appears. And now they've gone up to second because of some of the attrition. And now, in part with lap traffic, might be having a shot to still have a chance to win the race today for their class. Going back to position battles, though, it's the Porsche lead. Huge Ass Blue is caught up to Team Vikings Valhall. They go onto the inside, and Sven Daum has taken the race lead for the class. Gliding on by that time, the Radical of Kevin Enderman. But that time, Sven Daum ended up taking the tighter entry, heading into Abbey, able to take the class lead, and now lead over Team Vikings Valhall's Erling Bomer. In terms of the times, they struggled out of the pit lane. 122 the first time out, a 121 the second time out. Compare that to Huge Ass. They've ran in the 120s a majority of the time. They've been back on the circuit. They pit on lap 62, a undercut strategy for the race. They're just at the edge of making it on fuel. Bomer maybe just in the safe window to make it to the end without having to risk saving fuel. As you follow along now with Bomer once more, as they try and fall on in, going to the grass once more, on the rumble strip grass rather. Flows back on in. They're separated now by about 7-8 car lengths, with George Gruber interclass traffic to work with, along with Simon Etches. Demo again, the class leader for Huge Ass Blue, leads in front, uses the pick once more of Etches, with Bomer losing control behind. As an over rotation going through Abbey, ends up having to actually lock up a bit, that ends up causing the side turn, and you'll see on board shifting down to second, losing the back end, going as low as first gear in fact, able to save it and get the boost back in, but lost more time for that battle for the lead. And Demo has a chance to try and pull away for the class lead. As this has all gone on, Sim RCDE Strawberry has officially lapped the field for the time being. As once again, it's been a dominating race today for Patrick Young and his team. He came in on lap 66, has not come out of the car though. And this was something we've seen in the last round. If you do not have fair share for your team for about 15 minutes minimum, there was a penalty given at the end of the last round to one team in the sport class. They do have inside the paddock for them Lucas Dolzer to watch along if they decide to go towards that direction. Either way, 43 minutes until the action concludes here on the circuit. Things continue again to calm down again for the time being. As this continues to go along, it's continuing to be about track management. Most of the drivers have hit about 15-20 laps to go towards the calm period. Steen Rene Christensen has not been in the calm period. He has just went off in the sand trap again and nearly cut off Jacob Tops coming back on the racetrack as we still follow along with the overall race leader at the moment. And so this continues to shape up to be an interesting finish to this one, with 2 of the 3 classes still with fairly decent leads for the time being. However, I'd like to bring that attention back towards Gold Racing Team, because if you look at the times for Goldheimer compared to Selman, it's a second faster lap. It's now down to 1 corner for the class lead. Look at the difference, down to 1.5 seconds. They're dealing with some traffic. You see the amount of time gained the past few laps. As much as a full second with some of the traffic for Goldgeiger. Solomon has been able to have it managed much better, where they've been reaching them more spaced out. And again, it's been a difference of strategies, again, in different drivers. Matthew Smith started off in the race. Gold Racing Team pit on lap 51. 1 lap older set of tires for Solomon, in fact, before he jumped in for Dirk Fetterman today. You'll see them now head towards the front stretch once more. These MX-5s have a strong toe if you're able to line it up. It can be as much as about 4 or 5 miles per hour, rather, down the long straightaways. This time into the braking zone. Much more speed carried, much more harder braking in the apex, though, for Solomon. You're right on board as Solomon tries to head his way into make it a 2-prong corner. We'll see how he takes it. This time backs up the entry. Harder braking, though, for Goldgeiger. And that means a whole much slower exit. Solomon able to carry more speed still on the exit. Slow in, fast out is the mindset in terms of that section as they continue to shape around. Goldgeiger tries to go for the block. Solomon tries to draft his way around. Pinching up as Goldgeiger as he defends the inside line. Keeps the race lead for the time being for the class. Question is for how long as Solomon again towards the right side. Try to go for the pass there, but WR Racing's Christensen came out of the pits and deflected that battle for the time being. Goldgeiger able to break it up now, going through Priory. Has at least another half lap to defend. They have 26 laps to do something. Goldgeiger slides up the apex. That time Solomon nearly slides in, tries to take the tighter apex. As this is all going in, Patrick Yun appears to have some trouble going on the racetrack. Lucas Dolzer is into the car. That is not trouble, that is, a pit stop, as that has all been shaking up on the circuit. Side by side now for the MX-5 race lead. Gold Racing Team gets it at the stripe. They defend it on the bottom side. Solomon loses control. Time coming through Comps. Has to go way wide as they're able to save it. A good save by Solomon that time to prevent the car from snapping off the racetrack. That will lose them time, though. They've seen the window. Now they want to try and keep it open. Trying to shut it is Demo. Demo, the overall leader for the Porsches. Works his way by, has pulled away and then some from Team Vikings Valhall. Fisher Motorsport is in the top 3 for the said class at the moment, as Ava Verbatic has already closed it up quickly. Diving in is Gruber as he goes for a 4-tire drift and spins it out. Losing time is Solomon as big time lockup for Gruber. Look at the race replay. He tried to dive bomb it in from Narnia. Instead, he finds himself kicked out of the closet. Ends up spinning a side spin, having to go through the grass. Avoids contact, but does end up losing more time and ends up holding up Solomon. Solomon able to avoid contact. He almost actually drifted around in that corner as well, trying to avoid the contact. As once again, Gruber tries to get the pass done. Nearly eats the back bumper this time of Solomon. Able to avoid the contact as Dolzer now in the machine, now for the overall race leader. Moves on by, and you see him in the backdrop now. They start to break up a little bit as Dolzer moves on by. Goldgeiger still in the lead for the MX-5. Gruber, 15th overall on the racetrack. That is way far off. 10th, in fact, in the class at the moment in a rough day. Let's shuffle back, though, towards the MX-5s. And pardon me, towards a battle for third that's about to reach them. That is Benjamin Fisher that's had a quiet day. Jumped in the car for Mayer on lap 56. He's battling now with March and June. He came in the car on lap 70 for NAB Racing. NAB Racing, a very quiet race today. Their fastest lap in the 119s today. The only team to do so that is currently up at the front for the class so far. The thing is, they're still 8th. They're 8th overall, battling for a podium spot still. Way farther towards where I think they might have expected NAB Racing. Nav Racing rather coming into today. In terms of the points window, in terms of the sports class, we're the overall class leaders. We haven't had much to talk about in terms of them. They won at Daytona. They also got 81 points at Laguna Seca in some exciting battles during that race for them. And now, they've put on the gas pedal and turned it to Turbo Max. As June tries to get the slingshot this time by, looking at speeds and lap times rather towards the bottom side of your screens. 3/10 gain that last time by. 7/10 2 laps ago, 1 lap ago, 6/10. Her 10th June once again falls on in, and you see the differences looking on board. They move by the spinning car of World Sim Racing Team Junior, who's out of the way. They are about even in terms of how they take the lines, but the draft helping a little bit. We'll see how Fisher, though, handles Sector 2 through Abby. And you see the difference already. Fisher getting off a little bit more in the gas, locking up the tires. June actually gained some more speed, working his way to the final part of Ireland before going in towards Abby. Separation is now down to half a second, just under that ballpark. As the wide arc this time from Fisher. More speed carried, though, by June. And there's the confidence that a lot of drivers talk about. You need the confidence to feel, can I handle said line? June appears to have the confidence at the time being compared to his teammate today in Marco Durix, who is in the car much of the day. Durix bounced around in the 120s. So far, it's been a more consistent 120 mark for June since driving in. Durix at times went to the 121s, even to the 128s before he jumped out of the car, as June's up to the back bumper after gaining just under a full 10. This time carries a bit, slight more speed through the first prod of Maggots. Through the second prod they go. They got to deal with Gruber, and they're slowly catching up to Team Vikings as well, who's up the road just a little bit, about 2 or 3 turns ahead. So that's something to keep in mind as well, as Bulmer's been falling off the table just in front of them at the other side of Abby. This time going inside as June can't make the pass work. June this time. Still trying to fight hard he is right now. Trouble meanwhile for German sim racing friends as this has all gone along. He's done a full 360 heading through the second prod of Maggots, it appeared. He just went back on the racetrack, 17th overall, 14th in the class. And as we've seen many times, you lose control of the car, and that in Maggots a very easy place to do it, especially if you hit the rumble strips like he did on the left tires. It can cause a major drift. That time he is able to get the car back going without getting in people's way. And it's been a tough day again for the Friends team. Go back towards that position battle because they are still fighting like cats and dogs. Fisher that time defended hard by shutting the door on Nab Racing. They do have front bumper damage, Nab Racing does, from some earlier contact. However, they now have to deal with Stefan Nobes now to break up their battle. That loses them at least another 1/10 of a second, as Fisher has to deal with the traffic to the inside line. Gets off the gas. June floors it in, late breaks it in. Just can't get quite there yet. 33 minutes to go on the clock. These guys have 25 minutes to sort themselves out again on different strategies as they continue to play things out. Back to those MX-5s in the club class because Go Geyer, he really fell off the table this past lap. Down in towards the pack, towards the move again is Solman. Can't make it quite stick again. Still early on to try and make the move. Coming through Ireland they go. Again, Ava Verbatic competing as well in the Nero Endurance season finale as this is going on. Solman thought about it, had the chance to make the move on the outside instead. Wax and Christensen both make the move. That was again traffic in terms of lap cars to move by. Solman though, tighter entry, tighter apex rather. They now have a chance, no traffic to break them up this time. Solman this time decides to save fuel heading towards Bridge. We've seen how dangerous Bridge can be. However, he's been stronger through Priory so far. Brooklands as well. Brooklands this time, he ends up backing up, sends it in this time hard. not able to do anything quite yet. They have 21 laps to sort out this battle for position. Fisher Motorsport has now gone into the pit lane meanwhile, it appears, in the 184 machine. So they ducked in for a third pit stop. So that breaks up that battle we were seeing a bit before, it appears, with NAB Racing now cycling around. We still stick with this battle down to 2/10. Time picked up still despite a couple checkups for Vervatic. Overall race leader and Dolzer moves on by. Gergeiler tries to move on down, tries to take advantage of Solman going far left. Can't do it till this time. Solman this time works his way hard to the inside of Megats. Takes it a much better corner exit to the grass that time. I bet it was Golddyer, I should say. To the inside line goes Solman. He's been fastest throughout Ireland. They make door-to-door contact. Trying to hold up the momentum that time is Golddyer. He tries to send it in very deep this time through Abbey. He keeps the race lead. And an interesting strategy, door baiting severe damage to the right side of Solman's car. Solman now going to try and take the gloves off as he goes to the inside of bridge, backs off again, knowing Golddyer has been able to have the strong contact. Backing up against Solman, they now have Demo catching up. Demo could break this up, but now it becomes the interesting factor. Is that going to be potential aero damage on the front side of Solman's car? That is severe damage on the right front fender. You see Demo move on by. Doesn't cost either of them that much time in terms of the overall positioning. In terms of that battle we've seen on the racetrack. As that has all gone on, as we've talked about, some cars have ducked down. Fisher Motorsport did duck down, it appears, a second time for lap 82. There was some cars that undercut. That is something to keep in mind now with some of the other strategies as Gold Racing Team goes defensive line to make it once more. Riding on board now with Ava Verbatic. 225 again has been the strongest car for the class in the sprint for the club cars to Ireland today. This time the damage holding him up a little bit in terms of the draft. Golddyer, early braking. Solman, hard braking. Gets the outside fender, again can't make the pass stick. In terms of their pit windows, it's a 10-lap difference between, in terms of these drivers' pit windows, it's become fairly decent. 51 again for Gold Racing Team. And it was the driver swap for Ava Verbatic on lap 50, as mentioned once before today. To the inside again goes Ava Verbatic. They go try and go side by side as two Porsches try and work their way through. That is for position. NAB Racing has tracked down second in their class to Ballmeyer. He's going to duck into the pits though. That was something that might have been a potential possibility as Fisher Motorsport had come in. Losing time that time as the traffic goes through again. Once more to Solman. They separate once more by 5 car lengths. 28 minutes, 16 seconds, make it 15 on the clock as Hello Bell. He stares both the MX-5s and zooms on by towards the grass. And Graphite Racing fourth on the track at the moment after some of their spins today. Again, strong exit from Solman. Solman again with the chance through Ireland. He's been the strongest throughout here all day. SK Motorsports decides to go middle. That helps Gold Racing Team as they work through the rubber. Solman continues to be forced on that outside line, continues to struggle. And the more they battle for the position, the more that one team, GD Temple Racing, has a chance to unlap themselves for the class behind them. They were amongst this battle at one point. Take a listen in as they continue to try and battle and try and not bump each other out of the way as Solman has been near bumper to bumper. This time, much stronger run for Salman. Working through his 2 more Porsches. One big check up for Mercer. Blue flags abound. Bump drafting to Salman as he still wants to get by, still trying to save the fuel. Salman again would like to, of course, try and get by, as you can tell. However, he's reaching him at the wrong places at the wrong time. This time, right place at the right time. Salman side by side. Tries to squeeze it to the outside line of Maggots. It shifts back to the right hand as Goldgeyer again keeps the race lead for the class. Sork Racing Orange comes on through. And now force Gold Racing Team to the inside line. And hello again to German Disaster as they also move by. Again, closest battle for the class in a class at the moment for a position lead. Lots of drivers have been cycling around as this has all been going on and all been duking themselves out. Another Gold Racing Team car breaks this up. That was Gold Racing Team White, nearly running over their own teammate. Andrew Furset also moves on by to the inside of Bridge and gets sandwiched between the 2 MX-5s. Goldgeyer moves to the inside, trying to take advantage of Solman. Can't take advantage quite yet as they head their way into Brooklyn. Into Brooklyn, they make contact! Solman this time ends up hitting the back bumper, and that was a major save, but a major change for position. That could be a potential penalty for Solman. These 2 were bumping and banging for a couple laps, and you see the ramifications there. Solman ends up braking later, makes the back contact, causes a side slide, and Solman to the race lead for the time being. After that contact, Goldgeyer ends up falling to second. Avoided damage, however. Solman didn't add any more front bumper damage, as this is all continuing to break up a battle now that's cycling out for 6th. Nav Racing, we talked about, as high as 3rd with some of the pit stops, battling with Racecraft. Racecraft, you've seen last time, lost some time. The reason they gained 26 seconds was because, in part, pit stops, it appears. Because Nab came in on lap number 85. Has trouble! That was a spin in front. Louise Emerton spinning in front. That's going to hold up some action. Look at Gold Racing Team, meanwhile, the 243. Right after what we've seen. We'll check that out first. Live action for Emerton's causing trouble. This happened now, and this was more contact. Bad exit, big contact, Gold Racing Team spun around. That had to be something. So a major situation now for the sport class lead. As that was all going on, Louise Emerton went sideways and crashed 2 or 3 cars, including Bombshell Motorsports, holding them up for severe time after they had an over rotation on the apex exit. So 2 major race-changing incidents, more so, of course, the sport class lead. But Selman, what in the world happened in that past lap to cause all that? He avoided all of that, mind you, as we continue to see the aftermath of all of that. But he, after taking the class lead, led by traffic, ended up having it, went off in the grass through Maggots we've seen, and then just the wide apex we've seen in the first part of the first replay ends up causing the contact. Gold Racing Team with major ramifications after leading most of the day. Ava Vervatic to the class lead. Battle on screen is for 5th now on the circuit for the sport class. These again are the Porsches. Dealing with the pressure of Clancy's. Clancy's continues to lose time. Again, these are on very different cycles, but we have seen June have a strong run from what was essentially for them, for Nav Racing, 1 position less of a spot, a quiet race where they were stuck in the mid-pack majority of the day. Now it being on the right strategy. Lacey's meanwhile just gained time, believe it or not, by 2/10 because in part traffic again. The virtual fans watching along with half a second separating the 2 drivers again. And for Racecraft Esports, in terms of how their season outlook has gone, for those wondering, course, they have not recorded any. They did have a potential entry for Laguna Seca. Did not record points, of course, in that opening, in the last round, rather. First round for points. They did not meet the minimum laps required for the race to earn points for round number 2. This is the chance for them to earn their first points of the entire season for Steve Places and his teammate today, and Thomas Hodpockery. They're slowly closing in, mind you. You see that blue blur you might have seen just ahead of them? That is Andrew Furset for position. They're also closing in on. The times between these drivers for position and the car up ahead next, 1 second. Yes, you see a 1:21 for the blue car you just seen in front, 1:20 apiece for the cars you just seen blur by and exit their way out of cops. There's a chance they catch the back of Andrew Forsyth in the next couple laps. That is huge-ass Gold, who has been quietly running up, who is now worked their way to the highest position of the day today. Dealing with traffic now is June and Claysees. Claysees dive bomb to the outside. Nobes keeps away the contact. Bit of a tire spin from Fawcett. That's where the smoke comes from, as now this turns into a 3-car battle for position. Fawcett, he pit on lap 68 last time for his strategy. That again is a much different one compared to a lot of the drivers today. Lap 70 for June for his driver swap. Claysees lap 64. Fawcett now loses more and more time. It's been 1.2 seconds last time. Keep an eye on the bottom ticker. We'll see how much he loses on this time. Let's buy the traffic. This time gained by Nab Racing alone. As they cross the stripe, 1.1 seconds. Fawcett now has to deal with 2 prongs of pressure, as June has to slow up on the corner exit of Cobbs. Falling back towards the backside of Claysees is June. He did go in the grass a little bit. Potential maybe half a second course cut you could potentially get at that part of the racetrack. Looking back, it was Claysees who lost 2 seconds last time to June. They're now going to have to deal with some major traffic that might be able to help not just Fawcett but June here. Nearly stopping on the corner exit is Toff, 74 miles per hour at the time of the reach. They were as high as 130 miles per hour at that said portion of the racetrack. Still falling on the back of June. June down to 1 to 2 car lengths from behind, down to quarter car length as Claysees. Still very tight between the drivers. SK Motorsports has gone to the pits as this is all gone on, but June now in towards the slipstream of Fawcett. Look at the times again between the 2 of these drivers now in the circuit. Between Claysees and June, it's 0.3 of a second. Fawcett lost 0.3 to June. We're approaching where the strong point for these drivers have been. Taking advantage as Claysees nearly makes contact, does. Able to save the car though, trying to force it in towards a square pole. You know those games where you have trying to fit a square peg into a round hole? That was essentially the equivalent of that going through Maggots that time. Dive bombed it in, lost about 0.2 of a second. Still able to keep the car undamaged. Maintain minimal contact, and in the end, chance still to battle for the position. June, meanwhile, you see he's caught the back end of Fawcett. Fawcett, early break, late break for June, nearly hits the back bumper. He's already hit 1 car in the front bumper today. Doesn't want to add even more so. They'll have German Disaster Racing to deal with in a split second as you see him duck into the pits, throw that out the window. And they're also reeling in Gold Racing Team White for position. That is potentially a battle that can form up for as high as 3rd now. So we have the potential of a 4-car battle. It stays a 3-car battle. For comparison's sake, Gold Racing Team White. Contact behind. Hold on 1 second. Racecraft Esports spun off the racetrack, making contact with a prototype. That time it's Christensen. Bad exit off the rumble strip that time for the pink and black machine. Door bangs Christensen and spins around the 113. Christensen, again, him and his team. When it rains, it pours. Only thing is, it's only been on him, as you see in slow motion. The marbles and grass go up in the air. The pink and black 113 out of the battle for as high as third with severe damage to the right side of their car. A bad mistake on the rumble strips could potentially cost them. We'll have to see if that is a potential incident review in the later stages of this race. Let's go back, though, towards the battle as that went on. Nab Racing made the move on Fawcett. Fawcett was dive-bombed on the inside of Abbey, was able to make it stick June was to force him off the racing line in a Formula 1 style move. Was able to move up to 8th overall and up to 4th in the class. Now the focus is on trying to catch up to Jeffrey Grant Garzato. He ran a 1:21.9 last time, the driver up in front of these two cars. The drivers in the battle, despite side-by-side battling, ran a 1:21.4 and a 1:22 flat respectively, and towards Nab and Hugh Jasgold. 15 minutes to go on the clock. You now look at the time differences with the half-second difference between the two, but you might want to open up towards Granzato. If you look on board of June towards his front bumper, you'll see a black and yellow car. And Granzato, who has been off the pace a little bit since coming on, he has consistently been in the 121s for a majority of the laps. However, he's gone in the 122s. Fawcett, he's still trying to keep up with June we've been keeping with. Look who's back though, Christensen. He stayed on the racetrack with that severe left front fender damage. Lifted up that front fender there and potentially might have damaged the tray, the under tray on that Radical. As Christensen moves on by Fawcett. Breaks up that said battle. And you see the cause in part is a loss of 0.3 of a second. They now have an MX-5 to deal with as they move on through. They'll also have to deal with the interclass traffic of German sim racing friends in the next few moments here. Estimated 11 laps to go for the prototype you see. Fawcett saying bye-bye prototype, takes advantage of the mistake and passes him. So Christensen and now Fawcett going to go back and forth. This again not for position by far, as Christensen loses a position in terms of car position for the time being towards Fawcett. This is going to now help June if they keep on shuffling back and forth. Fawcett lets him go again. But again, the damage has been done. Look up in front though, because you have now Gold Racing Team. You see a couple cars for them. You'll also see a battle that's forming up for 11th for the class overall. That is between Slow Racing Team along with the team you've seen. You're also seeing Team Valhall down to a half a second advantage for the sport class. This has gone down a bit throughout the race today. Has gone back and forth a little bit. In fact, Demo had actually just lost the class lead. If you've been wondering between these two, as this has all been going on, this is all in part, again, because of position and traffic in the past couple laps. And it's now Demo who's trying to take back his lead. Half a second gained once he got the clean air. Trying to shuffle around, trying to go for the battle. Demo, stronger through bridge. Checks up on the exit. Bomer now works his way now through Priory. To Brooklands they go. Demo. Wider exit, wider entry this time through left field. Rides up. They've got an estimated 10 laps around the racetrack. Who will come away with the class victory? Still up for grabs in this class or multiple spots. You got the race lead up for grabs. You got third up for grabs in the class as well, as Gold Racing Team is falling back to Nab Racing as this is all going on. Who's going to be the one to take the checker flag? You'll have to see with 11 minutes 46 seconds on the clock. Demo back to the back bumper again, a Bomer. Both of them knock around the cones. A cone says hello to the onboard camera. In the slipstream goes Demo. Demo backs up the entry this time. Bomer has to go a slower apex once more. They do have Gruber, who is not for position. That could be potential picks used by these drivers. He has been catching up to these guys on every quarter entry. Once again through Priory, Demo sends it. He elects the stamp, can't make it stick to the envelope. Still tries to get towards the back bumper, can't do so yet. Again sends it aggressive. Way too high on the apex for a second time as he diamonds off the corner. Still separated by a few car lengths. The battle for third is meanwhile down to 5 car lengths. For update on that, Demo meanwhile wants this move done sooner rather than later. Demo trying to break the toe this time, surprisingly. Bomer moving back towards the lane. Meanwhile, Gruber has mechanical failure behind, goes off the racetrack. He's able to avoid incident that is just behind these two drivers as they continue to scrap it out. Bomer getting the draft now from Demo. Demo still can't slate it on in. Still having troubles as he still can't get a move to go. Appears to be a couple pit stops that might have to be kept in mind because both Huge Ass Gold and Racecraft Esports have both came in the pits. Compare the strategy between the two drivers. When Fawcett was brought in, it was lap 68. That was a little while ago, about 30 plus laps ago. For Huge Ass Blue, their last pit stop was again a lap 94 rather, which is why that position cycled about. The difference between the strategies and the difference in speeds, Team Vikings have not pit since lap 69, so they might be on the bubble to make it. 9 minutes to make the strategies work. Bomer still holds on after passing by 2 MX-5s. Those two were for position, and Estes and Daniel Jerez won. The cones continue to fly today. Demo wants to fly to the race lead. Sends it in aggressive. Scrapes against the side door of Bomer as he moves up the racetrack, able to save it still. Has to reset for the battle for position. Just scraped the door that time. Incidental contact as they continue to work things out. Bomer much more slower through bridge again. Demo still much more aggressive on the track. Both of them use a bit of that green tarmac on the curbing to help the rotation. Demo still trying to use up those fresh tires he has on the circuit. Down the front stretch once more they go. This is the closest battle on the racetrack for a class lead by far. And right now, one of the closest overall on the racetrack. We continue to follow along. Team Vikings Valhalla trying to make it back-to-back round victories. Huge Ass Blue trying to give their team redemption after struggles in the last round at Laguna Seca. Coming into this race, Huge Ass Blue, they did not meet the minimum laps required at Laguna Seca. Their counterparts had to start from the back today, have already had to pit on strategy. Huge Ass Blue still looking for their first overall points on the season. They have a chance to get a full points day. Battles going back towards the other direction because guess what? Nab Racing has made the pass work finally got by Gold Racing Team after a mistake coming out of Cops for the man you see in the backdrop in Granzato. That is Gold Racing Team White, who started at the front today. We're up towards the front for parts of the early stages, have fallen back since then. Back over towards the front though, towards another battle though. 6th overall for the MX-5. That is Sim Racing having to let cars by and having to deal with some drivers that is separated by 1.4 seconds. That is 7th rather for the Sim Racing team we're following along with. That is Huge Ass Blue zoomed on by them. Looking on towards the onboard. Demo can't get the spot again. Not in the right spot in Megats. And they get the stronger run this time. They don't knock around the cones. They got 5.5 laps to work with, 6 minutes on the clock. You see through the fog, the headlights burn. Demo burns its way to the inside line. Bulmer sees him go hard. They're side by side. Demo makes it stick. He takes the class lead. Huge Ass Blue takes the lead from Team Vikings Valhall with just about 5 laps to go. An absolute dive bomb by Demo, who's been leading for much of the second half of the race today. Sent it in from about a car length and a half deep on much later braking and taking advantage of the much slower apex we've seen all day from Team Vikings. The question is, can Demo pull away? He's got about 5 laps around the circuit until the checker flag waves. Anything can still happen though here at Silverstone. As this is all shaped up, Sim RC DE Strawberry, they have led by 1 minute and 11 seconds on the racetrack. Lucas Dolzer, since jumping into his car, has dominated in front of Sork Racing Orange, with taking advantage of some of their mistakes today. They've been the fastest car by as much in some cases as about a full half second in some cases. Only WR Racing B has been able to match them in pace much of the day, and they have dominated since they've been able to have the mistakes seen by that car you see with the back wing damage. And SK Motorsports, they are trying to hold off a car for position WR Racing B. Kyle Sherwoods jumped in the car after the mistake by Carter Condiner. If mistakes didn't happen, you never know what would have happened. They'll still finish in 6th. However, it's a question of what if. Being the second fastest car, if not the fastest prototype all day long, and incidents end up finishing themselves off. As that has gone on, Huge Ass Blue approaching 4 laps around the circuit. We've talked about them. We've seen their battle for position. They have taken off and away from Team Vikings Valhall, and by a mile. And that is in part, remember some of the strategy games we mentioned. They had to come in for fuel. So, Demo still able to make the pass, and Team Vikings not seeing the risk versus reward, trying to keep as many points as they can. It fell back to 4th. Huge Ass Blue, a heck of a try. Let's go back to Dolzer though before we go to those MX-5s, because there's been no incident reports for them today. Sim RC DE Strawberry with a chance to lap the entire field right this lap. Kevin Enderman, just 1 car in front. They go by Paul Cassidy as Cassidy goes off into the grass, and Dolzer loses the car. Dolzer ends up downshifting too early, loses the back end. He will lose about 5-10 seconds, but still keeps the class lead. And there's still a chance he's laps Enderman towards the checker flag. Let's take a look at the replay on board. Take a look at those gears. You see it right there. Went from 2nd to 1st, over revs the motor, loses the back end, carrying a mix of too much speed and too much revs. 2 laps to go as the commentators curse. We'll see now Team Vikings Valhall in the grass. So the commentators curse strikes 2 cars at once, as you might see now, seeing the overall race leader pass by them, because Valhall went off in the grass They're now 8th overall on the racetrack. They went off through Brooklyn. Still keep on to 4th, though, in the class. 2 minutes to go on the clock. Wildest drift of the day, meanwhile, I think just got to Jacob Toffs. His team's had a rough one. His team just hit the outside concrete barrier for the first time today. That is through Abbey. Pardon me, that is a mix of concrete and pillow tires, I believe. They are 7th in the MX-5 today, the club class. And they just overdrive the corner and then some. The sand doesn't even help them slow down. And they've got something wrong with their car. They just cut the corner by 3 seconds in live action, too. So Toffs, something is wrong with his team. But something that hasn't been wrong with Lucas Dalzer and Patrick Young today has been their ability to control the pace today. Minute 10 to go on the clock. Couple cars to try and lap. They won't reach Enderman, it appears. However, Dalzer playing it safe. They'll lap by Bulmer. They'll try and lap Solomon, the overall leader after the contact in the sport class today. It was an interesting run for the MX-5s today, but it's been a dominant run from SimRC DE Strawberry. White flag up in the air, 43 seconds on the clock. Lap car goes in the grass. Question is, can Dalzer make it to the checker flag without incident? Still 1 minute and 12 seconds. There's still a chance if he can't make it to the checker that Kevin Enderman might be able to steal it. You don't know what's going to happen here at this kind of a track in this kind of a series. We've seen multiple times. Dalzer works his way now through Mike Maggots meanwhile. And moves his way through Ireland. Just a half a track to go. 10 seconds on the clock. Watch it on your upper left-hand corner of your screen. Last time by, despite the spin, they're around 1 minute 18 seconds, give or take. Pardon me, 1 minute 21 seconds. Just lost 3 seconds and burned up some tire wear. But Dalzer, as the clock reaches 0, white flag up in the air, will go through a couple more corners. Lucas Dalzer and SimRC DE Strawberry have a few more turns to go. But they came into the round looking to try and add some points. After no points at Laguna Seca, they will win their second round of the season. Checker flag flies at Silverstone. Lucas Dalzer wins it in the prototype class. And quickly go back to the next car behind, because Bastian Solomon is the next car for class meanwhile. He's about to come across the start and finish line. Bastian Solomon for Ava Vervatic. After a dramatic pass on Gold Racing Team, he'll come across the start and finish line pylons and come away with a class victory of his own today for his team. While Huge Ass Blue has only few more sets of turns to go for them. They passed by Gold Racing Team. It was a bit of ifs and ands or buts today for them. But Spen Demo, he jumped in the car. He controlled the pace since then. Him and Justin Hall will be able to pick up the trophy and celebrate their first overall class victory of the season. Huge Ass Blue wins the sport class at Silverstone. And a dramatic race overall today. Couple cars overall shuffling around. You see the overall top 3. Most of the cars have made it around the circuit to cross it by the start and finish line. But overall, it's SimRC DE Strawberry for the second time this season, taking home the class and overall trophy as they'll do some burnouts. A dominant performance where they lapped all but one car on their way to prototype victory. Huge Ass Blue coming away with big victory themselves, are wanting to join in, with Ava Vervatic joining in on the backside of the picture. A heck of a race today here on RacespotTV for the Club Sport Series, powered by DGFX Racing today. Let's take a look at the results. Start off with the prototypes. SimRC DE Strawberry came away with a victory, as mentioned, 1 minute and 37 seconds, all the way back to Sork Racing Orange. They showed some great pace in the last stages, however, were not on the same strategy throughout the pace today. WR Racing were the fastest car in the second half of the race. They came away third, though, after making it to multiple penalties for drivers for them today. Graphite Racing comes away in fourth spot. Also finishing off with some troubles, though, were WR Racing 13 laps down to fifth. SK Motorsports in sixth after being the second fastest, if not the fastest prototype much of the day. Apex Racing Group Blue and PCDC Motorsports Red round out the class positions there. For the Porsches today in the sport class, Hujas Blue and Sven Demo came away to the checker flag. They have the winning strategy, made it on fuel, pulled away to a 15-second victory over NAB Racing. Gold Racing Team White finished off in third. Team Vikings Valho was on a different strategy, had to come into the pits with under 5 laps to go, finished fourth. Fisher Motorsport in fifth. Hujas Gold finished sixth in the class with Racecraft Esports, along with Port Basel by Sorg, Rennsport Esports, along with the Sim Sport News and Flow Racing Team cars, rounding out the top 10 in the class. Look at the rest of your class standings. Real Pixel came away 11 today, 8 laps down. Bombshell Motorsports, they did not have a great race today after being up at the front of the first moments of the race. They had multiple penalties, multiple spins, and in the end, finish off 13th. PCDT Motorsports Blue finishes 14th. German Sim Racing Friends behind them, with German Disaster having an absolute disaster of a race today, finishing last in the class. Rounding out the overall classes today was the club class. Coming away with the victory after major contact towards the final stage of the race, Ava Vervatic taking the checker flag. Team Viking Slipner, they came away with a quiet second place finish with all of that going on, with Kurtik Molik behind the wheel. Gold Racing Team, they had to pit after the contact on lap 79. They finished third. They are on the third step of the podium. GT Temple Racing finished fourth. World of Sim Racing in the fifth and sixth positions with their main and junior teams today. SimSport News Racing, powered by iZone, have their MX-5 behind that, with Bombshell Motorsports having a few penalties, finishing off in eighth. Torque Freak Racing, Maggots, and Real Pixel round out the top 10. Real Pixel DNF very early in the race after having to get repairs, then backing up into the paddock garage doors and nearly destroying the entire paddock interior somehow. Meanwhile, why don't we talk to one of the main drivers that brought the overall race leader victory lane today. Sim RCDE Strawberries, Patrick Young is with us here in the Race Spot booth. It was near dominance for you today and your entire team, lapping all but one car. Heck of a race. Tell us how you did it today, Patrick.
How I did it? I mean, I guess we basically just had luck that Carter had this incident.
Yes.
And yeah, our pace was very similar, and Lucas just did an awesome job in bringing it home. So I'm pretty happy right now.
I can tell you're kind of happy for sure right now. How was the car feeling when you started off the race today compared to what Lucas might have been saying towards the closing stages of this race, having to manage all kinds of traffic today?
Yeah, the traffic was because of the small track, of course, and the car felt better and better and better throughout the race. We had no issues with spinning rear tires or something like that. Just maybe little mistakes by our own. Rudolf, who is also in the team with us, did an awesome job making the setup. As always, huge shout out to him, and of course, it was very nice to drive.
It looked like it for sure in terms of the speed. What kind of, if any, what kind of difficulties did you feel as you were racing in throughout the day today? Of course, you talked about the pressure, of course, from SK Motorsports during their stint before they had that mistake that ended off their day for the most part, finishing 22nd overall. What was some of the main difficulties to try and keep up the pace, try and keep the lead, especially with what appeared to be a lot of traffic where you went back and forth the bridge?
Yeah, I mean, it was like I had trouble in traffic, so he catched up, and then he had trouble in traffic, so I could catch up. So basically the traffic was the main key in this race, like I said, because of the small track. And I mean, the most difficult thing today was, yeah, basically the traffic, but it was nicely handled because everyone did a top job on track to make it easy for the faster cars to pick a line, like into cops. It's reasonable difficult if you have a Mazda or a Porsche. So, but they all did a great job in making it easy for us.
Anyone you want to thank before we let you go here, Patrick?
Of course, to our to my awesome teammates at SimRC.de, to Asha Racing, our sponsor, and to you guys for the nice stream. I saw you have a great graphic mod or something like that. It just looks amazing.
Congratulations on the victory today, Patrick. Well deserved for you and your team.
Thank you.
That was Patrick Young coming away with the overall and prototype class victories today here at Silverstone, on the way to nearly lapping the entire field today. It was a heck of a dominant performance for him, and a lot of emotions going to a lot of the drivers potentially today. Hey, let's bring in your next class leader. The sport class winner today was the man behind the wheel towards the checker flag, Sven Demo, coming away with the checker flag for the class. How are you feeling after coming away with your team's first victory of the season in the series?
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm feeling great right now. We had some issues in the first two races. Made some stupid mistakes, so it's great to come back like that. And it was a lot of fun. Really clean driving out there, and I enjoyed myself a lot.
To quote Matt Plays, this will be a huge victory. Sticky out ton face. But really, let's talk about that battle towards the final laps. You and Team Vikings Valhall, what was going through your mind as that was all shaping out towards your side-by-side and whatnot, and basically towards where you finally got the job done on the dive bomb into Abbey?
Well, I had passed him before, like somewhere in the middle of the race, and I knew I was a bit quicker. And I thought they might have to go to the pits, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I was like, okay, I have to make this pass just to be sure I'll actually be in front and get the win. And then, yeah, I had a pretty good run, and I thought they'd be braking. They braked a little bit early, and so I was like, I might just dive in there, and it worked out. It was pretty close. I think we made slight contact, but yeah, I got to stop. I managed to stop it on the apex, and yeah, mostly a clean pass, even though it was a pretty late dive.
Of course, next round real quickly, 4 hours at Zolder. What are your team's thoughts heading into that race on April 20th?
Well, first of all, we're gonna try to avoid or to do the same thing we did last year, where we started our space program 2 laps into the race and just wrecked half the field. So let's not repeat that. But other than that, I think we have great pace, and we'll just try to do the same we did today. Just stay out of trouble early on, and then, yeah, win on pace and strategy towards the end.
I'm going to ask David Haynes for that copy of that tape to see what happened with that. Real quick, anyone you want to thank?
Yeah, first of all, thanks to my teammate Justin for driving the opening stint and keeping the car clean. And yeah, Andrew Fawcett and Alexander Koffert for keeping the company and doing really well, getting P6 and UJS Gold. They did a great job today as well.
Congrats on the class victory. That is again Sven coming away with the checker flag Sven Demo today for Huge Ass Blue. That brings in the club class leader, and it was a interesting one today for Ava Verbatic. Of course, we're talking with Dirk Fetterman now in the broadcast booth here. He drove in the first stint as a part of that 3-4 car battle before the contact there, and team ends up winning the race via contact with Gold Racing Team towards the end. Dirk, what are your thoughts on how this race unfolded for your team?
The beginning was quite good. We started from pole and Yeah, but then I made a small mistake plus small contact and lost about 12 seconds or so to then the P1 to the leader. So yeah, basically just drove through the traffic, and with a bit of luck we got to P1 again. Unfortunately, with contact with car number 243, I think it was.
Indeed, right now, how was the car feeling real quick for your team overall?
The car was fine. The Mazda is really good in these cold conditions. A bit oversteery, but you can handle that easily. After the crash, though, we lost about a second per lap.
And of course, now next race I mentioned to Hugh Jaskell, Blue rather, is at Zolder. How do you feel about Zolder?
It's a really fun track. I really like it. Yeah, we have to practice it again, and we will see how we will get there.
Anyone you want to thank before we let you go after your team came away with the club victory today?
Just my teammate Bastian Salman and yeah, Yuri Yak, our team manager. He asked something during the race. It was tactic.
I'm sorry?
He asked why didn't we pit so early, the first pit stop, and it was just tactic with traffic and stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, I get what you mean, but congratulations either way on the class victory.
Thanks.
That was Dirk Fetterman and his team coming away with the class victory today for the club level. Let's talk now to the second place driver for the prototype Sorg Racing Orange today. Came away second. Kevin, how do you feel about coming away second today? And what was a strong performance from you?
Oh, pretty good. We had to save a lot of fuel at the end. I crossed the line with 0.1 liters left, so it was lots of fun and a great challenge to just save those 3 laps we had to save to be in front of third place.
Indeed. Anyone real quick you want to thank for being a part of your ride today to the second place position?
Pardon?
Anyone you want to thank for being a part of your run to second?
Damus, he'd done a great job in qualifying and the start. And then everyone, like, it was pretty clean racing around us. And yeah, and the DGFX guys who organize it.
Thank you very much for the quick time, Kevin. Congratulations on second in the class. Of course, quickly talking through some of these drivers that have had some strong runs. One team that had a strong run and also gained some good points in for their standings outright, NAB Racing. Marco Durix now joins us in the broadcast booth. How important was it to have this run to finish off in second after such a close battle for much of the way to try and come away with as many points as possible, coming in at the top of the standings in the class?
Yeah, pretty important, of course, leading the standings and gaining quite a lot of points of to the nearest competition makes quite a lot of difference, of course.
Indeed, right now, real quick, Zolder's coming up. It's a 4-hour endurance race. How much does that change for your strategy coming in, of course, as one of the top teams in the class in the point standings and wanting to try and carry that momentum onward?
Really nothing. We have 3-4 great drivers. We should be able to do well there. We're lucky to get back to the podium today because after lap 3 I was back in P13 after I was hit from behind, and so we are really over the moon to get second today.
Real quickly, anyone you want to thank for today?
Just my teammate Martijn and my other teammate Frank, who was with us the whole race and did some strategy and just mental support.
Congratulations on the second place in class finish, Marco. That was Marco Durix from NAB Racing. We're now bringing in the driver of the 243, and this is the driver who finished third in the club class. This is now Matthias Goldgeier, who is behind the wheel when the contact happened between him and Ava Vervatic. What was your perspective heading in towards that tight turn for the contact?
Well, I felt like I gave him enough room to brake normally. I didn't feel like I did anything different. But as they said, it could have been netcode. The organizer said it was code. So it happens in racing. Of course, I'm not pleased with it. It's our lead, but I think overall contact could have happened anyway. Racing incident.
Yeah, indeed. This is the second round your team has gained at a high number of points. How important is that to try and get things together after getting no points at Daytona?
Very important. Had a very tough first round. We got hit in turn 1 at Daytona, out of the race. Tough round, Laguna Seca as well, but we did well. And we hope to get a win here. But I think we're all very pleased with.
Anyone you want to thank before we let you go?
I want to thank all my drivers. Thank you to the organizers for possible.
And thank you very much for the time, Matthias. Congratulations on the top 3. And we're going to bring in some of his fellow teammates who raced in the Porsches today. Finishing third was Gold Racing Team White. They were up towards the front at the start of the race today in the class. Came away 7th overall today. We have the 2 different drivers, I should say, in here with us. Jeffrey Granzato, also along with Taj Edwards. First off with Jeffrey, from your perspective, how was the racing today for you and your team running up towards the front a majority of the day today?
So our biggest challenge today was strategy. Initially going in, we thought it might be a 3-stop race because the new fuel limits of 60 liters made things really tight. But we decided on doing a 2-stop strategy, and throughout the race, we were constantly calculating and recalculating if we would make it to the end, which we did in the end. I would have liked it to have been second and third. I just got a bit unlucky in terms of managing traffic, but it's a good result overall.
And Taj Edwards was the driver who jumped in the car during the second stint. And how difficult was it to be what I call the glue guy, essentially, to try and keep the consistent times while also try to fit those fuel calculations that Jeffrey mentioned?
Initially it was tough, but it got easier as the laps went on. Traffic was a bit of a pain. There was a lot of issues with traffic, but still managed to hit the fuel numbers, and guys are keeping me up to date over the radio.
And I'm going to ask you this, Jeffrey. Zolder's coming up real quick. Your thoughts on Zolder in April?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It's a 4-hour race. I don't know what that means for strategy yet, but hopefully we could figure something out for Zolder. I'm looking forward to it.
Taj, who do you and Jeffrey want to thank for tonight, for being a part of your run to a top 3?
Hey, first thanks to the entire Gold Racing team. Thanks to Jeffrey and Jean-Philippe, who is not in the interview room right now. But yeah, thanks to those guys. They really put in a lot of work because I wasn't able to prepare a lot for this race because I had some mechanical issues. But they did an excellent job, tested the car. We got a good strategy, and thanks to those guys, man. Thanks to the whole Gold Racing team.
Congratulations on the 3rd place in the class today, guys. Good run.
Thank you. And thank you to you guys for the broadcast as well.
Thank you very much, Taj Edwards and Jeffrey Granzato joining us in the broadcast booth. Part of today's action, but a heck of a race today from start to finish. I'd like to thank all our sponsors now on your screen for being a part of today's coverage of the Club Sport Series, powered by DGFX. I'd also like Nolan Rempel who was a part of today's broadcast for the first hour of today's action, along with Hugo Weiss in the director's seat from start to finish. With that, I'm Justin Prince. It's time to say goodbye from Silverstone. Next round is on April the 20th. It's a 4-hour endurance race at Circuit Zolder. An interesting one to say the least, and what could be a dramatic one on the 2.49-mile circuit. 10 turns, very small racetrack, means very little space to try and navigate the traffic. With that, it's time to say goodbye until then. Enjoy the rest of your night, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.